Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Became Sukuna's Vessel. Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. K19 here, everyone. Yes, you read the title correctly. The characters from My Hero Academia are going to watch and react to episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen, but instead of animation or a movie, the events will unfold in a different universe. Many MHA characters will appear as alternative universe counterparts, though not everyone will be included. You'll soon discover who will be featured and who their counterparts will be. Don't be upset if some of your favorite MHA characters don't appear as alternative counterparts in the JJK universe. So without further delay, let's begin the prologue. A person sighed in boredom, feeling restless after 22,000 years since the multiversal war, with no entertainment or fights to break the monotony. Naomi, the personal assistant and lover of this mysterious individual, noticed his discontent. After pondering for a moment, she approached him and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. With a smile, she suggested an idea that could entertain him. He looked at her, intrigued. She proposed that he create a scenario where people from one universe could react to events in another universe. He hesitated, doubting that anyone would be interested in watching events that had no connection to them. Naomi playfully teased him, pointing out that despite being a powerful being treated like a god, he could be a bit oblivious. When he looked offended, she laughed, clarifying that her comment was meant in jest. She continued, suggesting that he use his reality-altering powers to bring characters from another universe to react to events where they also existed as alternate versions of themselves. This would surely pique their interest. Before she could elaborate further, he pulled her onto his lap and hugged her, expressing his gratitude. She returned the embrace, both smiling at each other. After they separated, Naomi asked which universe he wanted to feature for the reactions. He replied that he wanted to use Jujutsu Kaisen and asked which universe should watch it. After some thought, Naomi concluded that it should be My Hero Academia. In the My Hero Academia universe, it was 6 p.m., and the students were returning to their dorms. Aizawa headed to his room, exhausted after a long day of teaching and managing his students, particularly dealing with present Mike and keeping Bakugo in check. Meanwhile, the heroes, including Midnight, Mike, Fatgum, Endeavor, and others, were busy with their duties. Detective Naomasa Tsukachi returned home from work, while the wild pussycats prepared dinner for Kuta, who was doing his homework. The League of Villains was relaxing in their bar, now without Kurogyri, while their former leader, All for One, was confined in Tartarus, surrounded by machines. The big three were engaged in conversation while Eri stepped away to the bathroom. Meanwhile, Ms. Joke was watching TV. On Island, Melissa and David Shield were working on a project. The retired hero, All Might, was enjoying tea with Gran Torino. Lastly, Recovery Girl was scolding Death Arm for getting hurt during a fight due to his recklessness. Class 1B had also returned to their dorms to unwind, though Monoma's incessant ranting about Class 1A was becoming increasingly annoying, leading Kendo to consider intervening. Suddenly, everyone vanished into thin air as if they had never been there. Shigaraki looked around in confusion, wondering where he was and how he had ended up in a theater-like hall with a large screen. He blinked in disbelief when he spotted his master, All for One, appearing before him. All for One, equally perplexed, realized he had somehow escaped Tartarus and was now able to stand without mechanical support. Shigaraki called out to All for One, who confirmed that they had both been teleported to this strange place. As All for One spoke, the other members of the League of Villains appeared as well, all expressing surprise at their leader's presence. Before Twice could ask what was happening, the students from Class 1A materialized in the same space. The two groups stared at each other, confusion and surprise evident on their faces. The villains wore sinister smiles while the students looked fearful, especially in the presence of All for One. Before any confrontation could occur, the pro-heroes, who had also just arrived, positioned themselves protectively in front of the students, ready for battle. A familiar voice echoed from a distance. It was the lean figure of All Might standing alongside Gran Torino. He demanded to know the meaning of their situation and how All for One had escaped prison. All for One greeted All Might mockingly, claiming he had no idea how they were all there or who had brought them. Najire, panicking, searched for Eri, while Mandalay looked for Kutta, both realizing their absence. The heroes and villains glared at each other, activating their quirks, only to be surprised when nothing happened. Shigaraki attempted to decay a seat, but it remained intact. Bakugo tried to create sparks in his hand, but nothing emerged. Everyone expressed their disbelief at their quirks failing to activate. Just as All for One began to speak again, Melissa unexpectedly fell onto him, followed by David's shield. Melissa looked up in surprise, recognizing Midoriya and Yayorozu among the crowd, and questioned where she was and how she had ended up there. All for One growled in annoyance, feeling the weight of Melissa on his head. Melissa looked around, curious about the source of the sound. The people present were surprised to see Melissa and David, their confusion quickly turning into laughter as they registered the sight of All for One, face down on the ground with Melissa sitting on the back of his head. The story began with a certain green-haired boy tied up in a chair. Everyone thought the same thing as they recognized him. It was Izuku Midoriya. As he looked around, he noticed he was in a strange room surrounded by candles and fireflies inside large tubes, with seals covering the walls. Midoriya thought to himself, acknowledging his predicament. All Might shared a similar reaction, both of them shocked to see Midoriya in such a state. A blindfolded man sat in front of him, and the audience exclaimed in surprise at the resemblance to Kakashi. Midoriya surveyed the room, feeling the weight of the heavy chains binding him. He wondered what had led him to this moment. Toga, excited, speculated about Midoriya's situation, while Lita jumped up, insisting there was no way Midoriya could be a villain. All for One smirked, questioning Lita's certainty, but All Might defended Midoriya, asserting he would never commit such acts. K-19 interrupted, reminding everyone that there were other universes where Midoriya could have taken a darker path, leaving the audience in stunned silence. Midoriya, reflecting on this, pondered how different his life could have been if he had chosen that route. The blindfolded man introduced himself as Satoru Gojo, claiming to be in charge of the first year at Jujutsu Tech. Midoriya, realizing he was tied up for a reason, called out for Fushiguro, trying to move but finding himself restrained. Najire expressed concern about Midoriya's dangerous situation, while Aizawa raised an eyebrow at the unfolding events. Gojo informed Midoriya that he should be more concerned about others, and the audience gasped when Gojo mentioned that Midoriya was facing execution. All Might reacted with disbelief, while Lita and Uraraka echoed their shock. Aizawa glared at the screen, and Kirishima and Tetsu expressed their dismay at the thought of such a fate. Dabi rolled his eyes, while Shigaraki found excitement in the idea of a hero facing such dire consequences. Midoriya remained silent, his expression darkening in shock. K-19 urged everyone to calm down and continue watching before jumping to conclusions. The scene shifted to a residence with the nameplate reading, Midoriya. Midoriya was on the phone, asking a nurse about his grandfather. Mirio inquired about Midoriya's family, and Midoriya revealed that his grandfather had passed away when he was 2. The nurse entered the room, announcing a phone call for Midoriya. A voice from the hospital room told the nurse to leave him alone, startling everyone, especially Gran Torino, who recognized his own voice. Midoriya questioned the absence of his mother in the empty residence, while his grandfather instructed the nurse to tell Midoriya to go to his club instead. Midoriya decided he would visit his grandfather the next day. As night fell, a boy with pointy black hair contemplated the presence of a cursed object, questioning the intelligence of those guarding it. He opened a casket, finding it empty, and began searching desperately. The audience wondered what he was looking for, intrigued by the unfolding mystery. Momo reflected on the situation, noting that it was referred to as a cursed object, suggesting it was indeed an item with a dark history. Fushiguro, on a phone call, informed Gojo that there was nothing at the location. Gojo, intrigued, responded with a light-hearted joke about it possibly taking a nighttime stroll. Fushiguro, feeling annoyed, expressed his frustration, hinting at a future confrontation. Gojo then stated that they wouldn't be going home until the object was recovered, abruptly ending the call. Fushiguro muttered to himself about his irritation with Gojo. Mina chuckled at the exchange, finding Gojo amusing. Aizawa, however, disagreed, comparing Gojo's antics to those of Hizashi and Kayama, which drew objections from both Midnight and Mike. Aizawa simply gave them an exhausted look, indicating he had no interest in their rebuttals. Twice and Toga laughed heartily at the scene. The setting shifted to a classroom where excitement filled the air. A girl named Usagiyama-senpai and Iguchi-senpai were preparing to leave. Miruko, revealing herself, greeted Midoriya, playfully reminding him that she was his upperclassman. Midoriya sighed, reiterating that his costume was not bunny-themed. Miruko, with a sly smirk, playfully hugged him, which caused Midoriya to blush as laughter erupted around the room. As the audience awaited the next event, Midoriya led the group in a chant, asking the spirits which creature the council president was just barely weaker than. The audience's anticipation turned to disappointment when the answer was revealed to be a naked sea butterfly. The trio burst into laughter, finding the revelation amusingly trivial. Hagakure, confused by the term, received an explanation from Powerloader about the naked sea butterfly, a plankton that could survive in cold seawater. As they laughed, the door swung open, revealing Tenya Ida, who announced the name of the Occult Club. Midoriya greeted him humorously, calling him the Plankton President, which drew laughter from the crowd. Siro pointed out Ida's similarities to his counterpart in another universe, prompting Bakugo to join in the teasing. Ida, undeterred, dropped a letter on the table, reminding everyone that a research club without real activities would lose its room, demanding they vacate immediately. He adjusted his glasses with a flick of his finger, exuding authority. Pony commented on Ida's demeanor, causing the members of Class 1B and the teachers to glare at Monoma, who had influenced Pony's choice of words. Monoma gulped nervously as Kendo whispered a warning to him. Midoriya stood up for his classmates, asserting that they should not underestimate their abilities. Rumi then slammed a book on the table, drawing Ida's attention. She questioned the closure of the rugby field at night, noting that some students had fallen ill and ended up hospitalized, which seemed suspicious. Rumi continued, sharing that tough rugby players had reported hearing mysterious sounds before their illnesses. She revealed a newspaper article from 30 years ago about the disappearance of Yoshida-san, who was last seen at Sujisawa Third High School during construction. The article suggested that Yoshida-san had fallen into debt with loan sharks, leading to speculation that the disturbances at the rugby field were caused by his vengeful spirit. As she concluded her findings, Midoriya and Iguchi joined her in celebration, standing on their chairs alongside Rumi, who stood atop the table. The audience reacted with a mix of disbelief and amusement, with Shigaraki laughing at Miruko's exuberance. Hawks attempted to make a teasing comment but was met with Miruko's fierce warning. Midoriya, observing the scene, whistled in amusement. Jiro made a comment about the trio resembling Mina, Siro, and herself, which drew disapproval from the other two. They lowered their heads in defeat as Ida began to lecture them about classroom decorum, only to be silenced by Miruko's glare. Returning to the discussion, Ida expressed his frustration with the situation, attributing it to Tick's influence, which had turned the students into a walking encyclopedia. Bakugo, in particular, found this exhausting. Rumi, feeling downcast, was defended by Midoriya, who emphasized the importance of the Spiritualist Society's efforts to explore psychic phenomena. That's a serious activity report, isn't it? Azui, or Tsu, smiled and remarked that this world's Midoriya seemed far too talkative and energetic. Shishida responded that since this was an alternative universe, it was obvious he would act differently. Midoriya, overhearing this, wished he could be that confident. Bakugo lowered his eyes in guilt, reflecting that if he hadn't started the bullying, Midoriya might have been just as confident. Nizu, unable to see Bakugo's face but reading his body language, sensed there was something hidden between Katsuki and Izuku that they weren't sharing. He decided to take his time to analyze the situation further. Back to the story, Lida clenched his fist in frustration, declaring that this was not a child's play. He pointed out that the biggest problem was Izuku Midoriya, who was not in the Spiritualist Society but in the Athletic Society. Rumi and Iguchi stood with Midoriya, looking irritated as they noted that the Spiritualist Society did not meet the minimum requirement of 3 members. Midoriya raised a finger to indicate that he was a member too, which would make 3. Before he could speak, Rumi interrupted him with a questioning glare, asking if he had written the report. Midoriya confirmed that he had. Suddenly, another person entered the classroom, announcing that he had rewritten what Midoriya had written. Midoriya recognized Takaki, the advisor to the athletics club, who insisted that they needed him at the top of the country. Midoriya replied that he was not interested. Meanwhile, Iguchi sighed mentally, thinking that a teacher worse than a student had appeared. Takaki countered Midoriya's objection, stating that his refusal didn't count. He proposed a challenge. If Midoriya could beat him in a track and field match, he would give up on him and not disable his club. Midoriya accepted the challenge with determination, ready to settle it on the field. Iguchi sighed again, questioning whether it was right to rewrite people's applications. Kirishima noted that Midoriya must be a good athlete for a teacher to go to such lengths to prepare him for national sports. Tetsu expressed eagerness to see how manly Midoriya truly was. Midoriya felt a pang of jealousy toward this other Midoriya, who excelled in physical sports, while he himself was just below average without his quirk. Pixie Bob, sitting beside Midoriya, noticed his expression and wondered why he looked so envious. The scene shifted to the rugby field, where Fushiguro walked without his coat, questioning what was wrong with the field. He wondered if there was something buried there. Rikyu confirmed that Miruko's earlier claims were true, and just then, a grotesque creature emerged from the ground. Tokage of 1B exclaimed in shock at its appearance. Midoriya scratched his freckles, identifying it as a curse. As he explained that this universe dealt with curses instead of quirks, everyone listened intently. Nizu praised Midoriya's analysis, while Pixie Bob's eyes sparkled with admiration, thinking he was perfect with such intelligence. However, Mandalay mentally warned her to be cautious. Fushiguro continued, expressing surprise at the high level of the curse, suggesting it was probably a grade 2 curse. Midoriya noted this in his notebook, realizing the cursed object's influence was strong and difficult to pinpoint. All for One elaborated that the cursed object had awakened the spirit of the dead body as a curse. He identified the special grade cursed object as a serious problem and speculated on who had moved it. Meanwhile, the competition between Coach Takagi and Midoriya from West Middle drew attention. The coach demonstrated his strength with a pitch throw that reached 34 meters, while Bakugo laughed, calling him a weakling. Momo defended the coach, explaining that without quirks, it was an impressive throw for that time PRD. The crowd cheered for the coach, and when it was Midoriya's turn, the cheers grew louder. Rumi asked Iguchi if Midoriya was famous, to which he replied that he had heard tales of him beating all stages of the Sasuke physical training program. Kirishima praised Midoriya, noting that Sasuke's program was one of the toughest challenges in Japan. Midoriya blushed at the praise. Iguchi added that Midoriya was also known as the savage Mirko Philip, who had come back to life. Rumi expressed surprise that Mirko was still alive. Iguchi continued, stating that people referred to Midoriya as the Tiger of West Middle, which Rumi found corny. Midoriya asked the coach how to throw the pitch, and as he did, he casually pitched the ball. A small shockwave followed, and when the distance was revealed, it surpassed the world record of the 21st century, reaching an astonishing 44 meters. The audience in the story, as well as those watching, were left in awe. The ball soared through the air, striking the metal football goalpost and releasing a plume of steam. Bakugo stood in shock, his mouth agape as he processed the moment. Kishima and Tetsu jumped up and down, cheering and exclaiming how manly the display was. Endeavor remarked on the impressive feat, noting that if not for the goal post, the pitch could have traveled twice as far. Tiger added that even without using his super strength quirk, he could throw the ball 180 meters. Given the distance and Endeavor's calculations, he suggested that the throw could have reached at least 90 to 100 meters, which was already half the distance of his own throw. All Might confirmed Tiger's statement, Observing young Midoriya's expression and sensing that he was still holding back at least 20% of his strength. Monoma felt a surge of jealousy but refrained from commenting due to Kendo sitting beside him. Rumi remarked that Midoriya seemed more like a gorilla than a tiger, pointing out that it was a pitcher's throw. Others in the field echoed her disbelief, suggesting that Midoriya would excel on a sports team and didn't need to force himself to stay in the occult club. Rumi insisted that they needed him for their haunted adventures, as they wouldn't dare go to scary places without him. Midoriya countered that the school required everyone to be in a club and he felt he couldn't keep up with it. Rumi reassured him that he could be a ghost member of their occult club, which made everyone smile, except for the villains who found it dull. Midoriya expressed his desire to leave by 5 p.m. for personal reasons, admitting that he enjoyed the atmosphere of the occult club. Rumi and Iguchi nodded in agreement, accepting his decision. Fushiguro commented on Midoriya's impressive abilities, noting that he could perform such feats without curse energy, similar to Zenin Senpai. Momo echoed his thoughts, calling out Zenin Senpai's name. Midoriya glanced at the clock and realized it was already 4:37 p.m. He bid farewell to his friends and dashed out of the field. As he ran, he crossed paths with Fushiguro, who suddenly sensed a dark presence. A silhouette with multiple red eyes and a menacing aura appeared on the screen, causing the entire theater to tremble with its roar. Naomi glared at K-19, who promptly deactivated the feeling sensor. Apologizing to everyone, Naomi explained that the presence they felt was from a cursed object, and K-19 had used his power to amplify its effect. Reactions varied among the audience, with many students feeling nauseous. Midoriya, Lita, Todoroki, Momo, and Kirishima compared the sensation to All for One's presence during the Kamino Ward incident. K-19 thought to himself that this was just a taste of Sukuna's power, which would be far more overwhelming. All for One was taken aback, sensing something sinister that rivaled his own power for the first time. The pro-heroes took battle-ready stances in response to the cursed object's presence. Todoroki and Endeavor instinctively released hot steam, despite K-19 having removed their quirks. Tokoyami pointed out that the presence originated from Midoriya on the screen, suggesting that he possessed the cursed object known as rivalry in the dark. Fushiguro attempted to stop Midoriya, but he dashed away at astonishing speed, leaving Fushiguro in shock. Two students remarked on Midoriya's speed, speculating if he could run 50 meters in 3 seconds. The screen displayed a record of Midoriya running 50 meters in 5.47 seconds, surpassing expectations. Lita felt embarrassed, realizing that a quirkless individual could outpace him, as he had completed the quirk apprehension test in 3.04 seconds. Kamui Woods expressed his amazement, and even Emilady agreed. Midoriya felt proud rather than envious, happy to see his other self receiving praise. However, the mood shifted when Todoroki raised a concerning question about Midoriya's hoodie, recalling that he wore it during a troubling incident. The implication that Midoriya might face severe consequences for possessing the cursed object weighed heavily on everyone. Uraraka looked on with concern, while Shigaraki smirked maliciously. All Might and Aizawa feared the worst, and Midoriya wore a troubled expression, while Toga seemed excited at the thought of Midoriya in distress. The other characters, aside from the villains, shared their worries for Midoriya, and surprisingly, so did Monoma. Midoriya visited the hospital to bring flowers for his grandfather, entering a room labeled with his grandfather's name, Saito Midoriya. Cementos pointed out the connection, noting that Saito was Gran Torino in this story. The old man grumbled about Midoriya's visit, insisting he didn't want flowers. Midoriya explained that the flowers were for the nurses, prompting Saito to voice his annoyance at the gesture. The audience chuckled at the interactions between grandfather and grandson. Midoriya then explained that his club meeting had ended at 5 p.m. Oldman Saito mentioned that he wouldn't be visiting if he didn't have time. He then expressed his desire to share something important about Midoriya's parents. However, Midoriya showed disinterest in the topic. Saito urged him not to act cool in the face of serious matters, to which Midoriya suggested that his grandfather should just be himself. Saito chuckled, claiming that men are meant to die looking handsome and cool. Midoriya laughed softly at his grandfather's humor, encouraging him to remain true to himself. Saito turned to rest, commenting on how ridiculous the current generation was. Grand Torino nodded in agreement, while All Might quietly expressed his own thoughts, which led to a playful reprimand from Grand Torino. Saito then addressed Midoriya directly, affirming his strength to save others and encouraging him to do so without expecting gratitude. The UA teachers supported this sentiment, with Aizawa reminding the students of their responsibilities as heroes, regardless of personal goals. He emphasized the importance of trying to save others, accepting failure when it comes, and striving for improvement. The UA students stood up with determination, shouting, "Plus Ultra," in unison. The villains, except for Spinner, wore annoyed expressions, while Spinner smiled, recognizing that the future was in capable hands. Saito advised Midoriya to be surrounded by loved ones when his time came, urging him not to end up alone. As Saito finished speaking, a heavy silence filled the hospital room, mirroring the atmosphere in the theater hall. Concerned, Midoriya asked if his grandfather was okay. The scene shifted to the nurse and doctor's cabin, where a call revealed the sad news of Sato's passing. Midoriya looked up, tears welling in his eyes. All Might's expression changed as he felt the weight of loss, but Gran Torino's reassuring presence helped him regain composure. Midoriya, filled with determination, reflected on his grandfather's words, solidifying his resolve to become a hero. The scene shifted to Sato's calm face as a nurse covered him with a white sheet. Midoriya watched as his grandfather's body was taken away, then signed the death certificate at the counter. The counter lady asked if he was okay, to which Midoriya replied with a soft smile, expressing that he felt no real sadness, knowing his grandfather would want him to smile rather than mope. Meanwhile, All for One expressed his disdain for smiles, as they reminded him of All Might and Kudo, the second user of One for All, whom he deeply despised. All Might and Gran Torino shared a knowing look, recalling their own losses. Midoriya's conversation with the counter lady was interrupted by the sound of footsteps, revealing Fushiguro standing nearby. He introduced himself and requested to speak with Midoriya in a more private location. Midoriya mentioned he was in mourning, but Fushiguro insisted there was no time to waste. He warned Midoriya about the dangerous cursed object he possessed and asked for it to be handed over. Midoriya was confused but showed Fushiguro a picture of the object, explaining that he had found it and that his senpai had taken an interest in it. Fushiguro explained the severity of the situation, detailing the number of unexplained deaths and missing persons in Japan, attributing them to curses. Midoriya was taken aback by the statistics, while Shigaraki expressed his surprise at the scale of the threat, noting that even villains didn't cause that much chaos. Fushiguro elaborated on the nature of curses, explaining how they were born from negative emotions and how schools and hospitals often kept protective talismans to ward them off. The audience began to understand the implications of curses in their world, recognizing the parallels to their own struggles. Kaminari struggled to process the information, while Midoriya diligently took notes, muttering to himself. Bakugo, frustrated, called him a nerd, breaking the tension in the room. Midoriya raised his hand and asked if they should be grateful for the protection being offered. Fushiguro, visibly annoyed by Midoriya's questions, expressed his frustration. He explained that placing a cursed object of greater evil was a dangerous practice that only pretended to protect. Over time, the seal on such objects weakened, making them a lure for other curses. The object Midoriya had found was classified as special grade, and Fushiguro insisted he hand it over before anyone got hurt. Melissa noted that special grade was the highest rank, wondering what the lowest grade could be. Bakugo rolled his eyes, calling her a nerd, to which Lita defended her, stating that being a nerd wasn't a bad thing. Bakugo retorted that no one had asked for his opinion. Midoriya, trying to defuse the tension, mentioned that he didn't mind and suggested Bakugo take the object to his senpai. Fushiguro opened the bamboo box only to find it empty. He had been following the taint that clung to the box. Shodo Todoroki, who rarely spoke, exclaimed that the situation was serious. As Midoriya attempted to leave, Fushiguro stopped him, demanding to know where the contents were. Initially angry, Midoriya's voice softened with concern for his friends as he explained that his senpai had it and that they were discussing removing the talisman that very night at school. Fushiguro stepped back, sweat running down his neck, while Midoriya asked if that was bad. Fushiguro, baffled, replied that it was worse than bad, they were going to die. Miruko gasped, placing her palm over her mouth, mirroring Midoriya's worried expression. Toga, dancing with excitement, announced that they were finally going to see blood, much to the anger of Uraraka, Aizawa, Tsu, and Vlad King, who glared at her. Twice called her a sick psycho, joining in her dance with his other personality. In the darkened occult club classroom, Rumi and Iguchi removed the talisman from the object, illuminated only by a single candle. As they did, everyone gasped in unison, with Mina hiding her face in fear while Ibra whispered a prayer. When the talisman was removed, they discovered a finger, prompting Rumi to question its authenticity. Just then, the candles extinguished, and the room shook. Pixie Bob seized the moment, attempting to bury her face in Midoriya's back, but Miruko caught her before she could. Pixie Bob let out a cry of frustration at her failed plan. Miruko gave a thumbs up to Mandalay, who returned the gesture, while Ragdoll shook her head with a smile, teasing Miruko about her antics. The scene shifted to Fushiguro and Midoriya running toward the school. Midoriya asked if talismans could be removed easily, and Fushiguro explained that it was impossible for those lacking cursed energy normally. Fushiguro directed Midoriya to take a shortcut, elaborating that the object was too strong and the seal ancient, making it nearly ineffective. Midoriya admitted he still didn't understand much about curses. As they approached the high school, Fushiguro asked where they were, and Midoriya informed him it was on the 4th floor. Upon entering the school gates, a shockwave halted Midoriya in his tracks. He questioned the pressure he felt, but Fushiguro insisted he stay put and jumped over the gate. Before Fushiguro could leap down, Midoriya insisted on joining him, citing the danger and his bond with their friends. Fushiguro dismissed him again, jumping down alone. Hound Dog agreed with Fushiguro, stating it was safer for him to go alone, while Midoriya and Mirio gritted their teeth in frustration but ultimately complied with the teacher's decision. Rumi was shown hiding behind a corridor, holding her mouth to stifle any sound, while a curse lurked inside a nearby classroom. Reiko from 1B, usually fond of scary things, felt a connection to Rumi and Iguchi and didn't want to see them harmed. As Iguchi called out to Rumi, she felt relief at seeing him safe, but her expression turned to shock as she saw the curse looming behind him. The audience gasped in fear as the curse held Iguchi in its grasp, leaving only his lower mouth exposed as he begged for help. Miruko gulped in fear at the sight of the curse extending its hand toward her counterpart. The scene shifted back to Fushiguro, who was racing up the stairs, realizing the curse had been unleashed and its presence was overwhelming. He reached the 4th floor corridor and halted as he spotted a curse before him, a shadowy figure with multiple eyes. Fushiguro commanded it to move aside and formed a hand sign, summoning 2 wolf-like dogs from the shadows, one snowy white and the other black, both marked with triangles and red dots. The onlookers marveled at his ability to conjure such powerful creatures, hoping they could save Usajiyama and Iguchi. Outside the school, Midoriya stood anxiously, questioning whether he should wait as instructed. He recalled Fushiguro's words about sensing death nearby. The scene shifted to flowers in a hospital, where Midoriya pondered his fear of dying, reflecting on whether he had always been afraid of death. It didn't feel like he was, though. The scene shifted to a flashback of the compounders taking his grandfather's body away. As they found Midoriya as Itadori, Miruku as Sasaki, Ida as the Plankton president, and Gran Torino as Itadori's grandfather, they confirmed that Gojo, Fushiguro, and Maki would remain unchanged. Aizawa would also be part of the story, and it was a mystery who he would portray in this universe. In this 3rd chapter and the 2nd episode of Jujutsu Kaisen, the story continued without delay. As Fushiguro confronted Midoriya, claiming he would execute him, Midoriya quickly interjected, insisting he was fine. He pointed out that both of them were pretty beat up, and as he spoke, the black marks on his face began to fade completely. It suggested they get to a hospital. Shuji wiped the sweat from his brow, relieved that Midoriya had regained control. Ectoplasm agreed, noting that it seemed Fushiguro had made the right decision by not killing Midoriya. Fushiguro struggled to determine whether it was Itadori or the cursed object speaking. Frustrated, he wondered what he should do. Shigaraki, acting childishly, insisted that Fushiguro needed to kill Midoriya. Dabi gave Shigaraki an exhausted look at his antics. Suddenly, a voice interrupted Fushiguro, asking about the situation. Both the audience and Fushiguro gasped in surprise, realizing it was the one who had wanted to execute Midoriya. Gojo explained that he hadn't planned on showing up but had stopped by while out for sightseeing. He examined Fushiguro and chuckled, noting how roughed up he looked. He pulled out his phone and began taking pictures of Fushiguro, who shielded his eyes from the flash. Gojo planned to share the photos with all the second years. Aizawa scoffed at Gojo's immaturity, questioning how someone like him could be a teacher. Present Mike, overhearing this, reacted defensively, while Jiro bluntly agreed with Aizawa. Gojo, unfazed, continued to tease Fushiguro. The conversation shifted as Gojo mentioned the higher-ups, causing Hawks and Nizu to feel a headache. They understood the annoyance the higher-ups could bring due to their experiences with the Hero Public Safety Commission. When Gojo asked if Midoriya had found the cursed object, Midoriya sheepishly admitted that he had eaten it. A brief silence followed before Gojo confirmed he was serious, and both replied in unison. Gojo approached Midoriya, intrigued by the merging of their powers. He inquired if Midoriya could swap out with Sukuna, the curse he had consumed. Midoriya, confused, asked who Sukuna was, and Gojo clarified. After a moment of thought, Midoriya believed he could do it. Gojo instructed him to take control again after 10 seconds. Meanwhile, Vault King expressed disbelief at Gojo's reckless suggestion, while Aizawa reiterated his concerns about Gojo's maturity. Recovery Girl added that Gojo was even more reckless than Mike and All Might combined, which elicited dramatic responses from both. Shigaraki cheered for Sukuna to take over and eliminate Gojo, while Mr. Compress laughed at the unfolding chaos. Mina hoped Gojo's request wouldn't backfire, as she found him amusing. Back in the story, Gojo confidently declared his status, reassuring Midoriya not to worry because he was the strongest. The audience regarded him with skepticism at his self-proclamation. David Shield questioned if Gojo was the All Might of this universe, to which Aizawa explained that Gojo's carefree attitude stemmed from not bearing the same responsibilities as All Might. Shigaraki and All for One gritted their teeth at Gojo's declaration and the hero's explanations, developing a mutual disdain for him akin to their feelings toward All Might. Midoriya, curious, asked K-19 if Gojo was All Might's counterpart. K-19 clarified that Gojo was not, and in fact, his counterpart did not exist in Midoriya's world, although there were many universes where he or a counterpart existed. Gojo tossed a carry bag to Fushiguro, instructing him to hold on to it. Fushiguro caught it, recognizing it as Kikufuku from Kikujin. It was Sendai's specialty, and it was incredibly good. Megumi looked at the bag, wondering how someone could buy souvenirs while chaos unfolded around them. The silence in the hall was palpable. Vlad King expressed disbelief at the situation, questioning how someone could focus on buying machi when people were in danger. Midnight agreed, noting how unprofessional it was. Spinner remarked that Stain would surely take issue with this individual. All for One dismissed the comparison to All Might, stating that the person in question was simply egotistical. Aizawa lamented that he had been wrong, realizing that this individual was infinitely worse than he had initially thought. Gojo corrected the misunderstanding, clarifying that it was not a souvenir. Midoriya took a deep breath, feeling the familiar marks appear on his body, indicating his ability to swap back and forth at will. Gojo continued, mentioning that he planned to enjoy the treat on the bullet train home. Sukuna leaped into the air behind Gojo, prompting Fushiguro to warn him while Gojo spoke. He noted that Kikufuku was not like other souvenirs. Sukuna attempted to crush Gojo with a powerful strike, causing the ground to crack and dust to fill the air. Shigaraki cheered for Sukuna, eager to see Gojo defeated. Toga expressed her desire to witness the aftermath of the confrontation. As the dust settled, Megumi was revealed, clutching the bag tightly. He opened his eyes and looked up, only to see Sukuna's furious red eyes. However, Gojo had evaded the attack and was now sitting comfortably on Sukuna's back. The cheers from Toga and Shigaraki halted as they realized Gojo had emerged unscathed, casually perched on Sukuna. Hananuki commented on how they had underestimated Gojo based on his appearance, acknowledging that he was a serious contender. Midoriya jotted down notes about Satoru Gojo, describing him as a tall and lanky man who was a teacher at Jujutsu Tech. Despite his unassuming appearance, he was incredibly strong. Gojo, still on Sukuna's back, remarked on the exquisite whipped cream inside the treat. Sukuna, filled with anger, raised his claws and leaped at Gojo, intent on delivering a devastating blow. However, Gojo teleported away just in time. Kurogiri observed the scene, realizing that Gojo's curse ability allowed him to teleport, explaining his remarkable dodging skills. Sukuna charged at Gojo, attacking him multiple times, but each time Gojo managed to teleport out of harm's way. On Sukuna's third attempt, Gojo simply leaned against Sukuna's back, declaring that he wanted to show off for his student. Sukuna attempted to strike back, but Gojo teleported again, grabbing Sukuna's arm and spinning him around before delivering a backhanded blow that sent Sukuna reeling. Sukuna's face was shown, blood trickling from his mouth. While Toga usually enjoyed seeing blood, she found herself rooting for Sukuna this time. Baffled, Sukuna questioned Gojo's incredible speed, realizing that it wasn't just speed that made him formidable. Momo speculated that Gojo's ability might not be teleportation or super speed but something else entirely. Midoriya agreed, noting Sukuna's ancient knowledge of curse energy and how it suggested there was more too. Gojo then met the eye. Melissa nodded in agreement. As Gojo threw a punch at Sukuna, a shockwave erupted, sending Sukuna flying and causing widespread destruction to the ground. Kaminari exclaimed in shock, realizing that Gojo was not only fast and capable of teleportation but also incredibly strong. The rest of Class 1A and the teachers looked at Kaminari in disbelief, surprised by his analysis. He noticed their stares and asked what was wrong, but they quickly turned their attention back to the screen. Mina turned to Kirishima, confused by the group's reaction to Kaminari. Kirishima shrugged, unsure of how to respond. Sukuna crashed into the railing, exclaiming in frustration. He then charged at Gojo, declaring that Jujutsu sorcerers were always a nuisance, regardless of the era. All for one agreed with Sukuna's sentiment, having faced heroes for nearly 2 centuries. As Sukuna spoke, black energy enveloped his fist. This time, his punch connected with Gojo, sending debris flying and destroying parts of the school. The audience gasped at the level of destruction caused by the blow. Kaibara pointed out that half of them would have been killed by such a punch, emphasizing Sukuna's immense strength. Kozai questioned whether Gojo had survived, but Monoma's comment was cut short as he realized the situation was not as it seemed. Sukuna, with a smirk, declared that it didn't matter to him. However, his expression changed to shock as the dust cleared, revealing Gojo unharmed and smiling, as if nothing had happened. Shigaraki whined in disbelief, claiming it had to be cheating. Gojo began counting, raising his fingers as he did so. As he reached a certain number, Sukuna's heart was shown to stop. Sukuna, realizing he was losing consciousness, questioned who this Jujutsu sorcerer was. Sukuna's head drooped momentarily before lifting again, now devoid of the black markings that had previously adorned his body. Midoriya felt a sense of accomplishment, thanking Uraraka for her support. Bakugo interrupted, frustrated by the praise directed at Midoriya, while the others laughed at the exchange. Midoriya regained control, wondering if everything was all right. A wide shot of Gojo revealed debris floating around him, showcasing his impressive abilities. He expressed his admiration for Midoriya's control, lowering his fingers and allowing the debris to fall. Gojo's strength was undeniable, making him a formidable force in the ongoing battle. Yui expressed her admiration for Gojo's abilities, noting his teleportation, speed, physical strength, and gravity manipulation. Shoda remarked that he found Midoriya's control over Sukuna even more impressive. While the heroes and non-heroes were in awe of Gojo, the villains appeared taken aback. Midoriya commented on the annoying voice he could hear, hitting his palm against his forehead in frustration. Gojo approached him, stating that it was a miracle that Midoriya was still standing. He then placed 2 fingers on Midoriya's forehead, causing him to lose consciousness with a single touch. Before Midoriya could fall, Gojo caught him. Awase questioned what had just happened, surprised that a simple touch could knock Midoriya out. Bando, still disoriented, echoed his confusion. K-19 explained that Gojo had used curse energy on his fingertips and delivered a jolt to Midoriya's brain, activating his sleep-supporting cells. The group looked at K-19 in awe, and Melissa asked if Gojo could knock them all out with just a touch. Naomi confirmed this, adding that All for One, Kaminari, and Midoriya were exceptions due to their ability to use electricity to counteract the effects. Kaminari triumphantly declared that Gojo's ability wouldn't work on him, only for Aizawa to use his tape scarf to pull him back down. Shigaraki's hatred for Gojo intensified upon realizing that a single touch could defeat him, leaving many heroes and villains feeling powerless. Fushiguro inquired about what Gojo had done, and Gojo explained that he had knocked Midoriya out. He further speculated that if Midoriya wasn't possessed by Sukuna when he woke up, he might have potential as a vessel. Gojo then asked Fushiguro what they should do with Midoriya. Fushiguro took a moment to respond, acknowledging that even if Midoriya was a vessel, Jujutsu regulations would still demand his execution. However, he expressed his desire not to let Midoriya die. Gojo, amused, asked if this was a personal feeling, to which Fushiguro confirmed it was. Gojo then lifted Midoriya onto his shoulder, promising to do his best to help him, as it was a request from a precious student. As the scene shifted back to the present, Todoroki noted their return to the current time. Gojo reiterated that Midoriya was going to be executed, snapping his fingers for emphasis. Midoriya gave him an exhausted look, pointing out that Gojo's recap didn't align with the current events. Gojo defended himself, stating that while the execution was still on, he had managed to suspend Midoriya's sentence. Hawks questioned whether Gojo had convinced the higher-ups to suspend the execution. Dabi asked why Hawks seemed surprised, while Nizu explained the difficulty of dealing with the higher-ups, noting that it often required lengthy arguments to get them to agree on anything. All Might thought to himself about how typical this was, realizing that speaking out could negatively affect the students' careers. All for One looked at All Might, expressing sympathy for his inability to act against the higher-ups due to his condition. Gojo clarified that Midoriya's execution was not immediate, explaining that it was similar to the cursed object Midoriya had consumed. He revealed that there were 20 fingers in total, of which they possessed 6. Pony expressed surprise at the number of fingers, while Midoriya asked if it included both fingers and toes. Gojo clarified that Sukuna had 4 arms. He then demonstrated his power by throwing a finger, which landed with a flash of blue light and created a crater in the wall. The audience gasped at the display of force, mistakenly believing it to be gravity manipulation. Uraraka wished she could do the same. As Toga experienced brief flashes of black and white, she struggled to understand what she was seeing. Gojo approached the wall and pulled the finger out, unharmed. He explained that they couldn't destroy the fingers, as the curse was incredibly powerful and grew stronger over time, outpacing modern jujutsu seals. Spinner calculated that the Sukuna they had seen was only at 5% of his strength, but Lita corrected him, stating that each finger was likely more powerful than the last. Shinso pondered how strong Sukuna would be at full power, considering the strength of just one finger. Gojo then pointed at Midoriya, explaining that if he died, the curse inside him would die as well. He noted that the elders were demanding Midoriya's immediate execution, but he questioned whether that would be a waste. Gojo proposed that instead of killing Midoriya right away, they should wait until he had absorbed all of Sukuna's power. Midoriya listened in shock as Gojo revealed that the higher-ups had agreed to this plan. Kurojairi pointed out how they managed to convince the higher-ups. Toga and Spinner felt anger rising within them, despising the higher-ups for wanting Midoriya to face such a grim fate due to circumstances beyond his control. They could relate to his struggle. Toga had faced misunderstanding from her parents, while Spinner had endured abuse because of his appearance. Unbeknownst to them, Mizo Shuji from Class 1A shared their feelings, having experienced similar challenges due to his looks. With determination, both Spinner and Shuji resolved to change hero society and put an end to discrimination. However, their paths diverged sharply. One aimed to become a villain while the other aspired to be a hero. Gojo informed Midoriya that he could either perish now or seek out all the parts of Sukuna and face his fate afterward. Midnight, usually playful and flirtatious, appeared serious and sympathetic toward Midoriya, recognizing the heavy burden he bore at such a young age. For a moment, she recalled Shirakumo. At Tsujisawa Hospital, Rumi sat beside the hospital bed, looking forlorn. Reiko breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that Iguchi was okay. Midoriya entered and approached the door, prompting Rumi to call out to him. He stepped inside and inquired about Iguchi's condition. Iguchi lay unconscious, bandaged and vulnerable, reminding Midoriya of his own injuries from the villain attack at the camp. The doctors say he's fine, but he's still unconscious, Rumi explained, tears streaming down her face. She felt responsible, lamenting that if she hadn't invited him to school that night, he might not be in this state. The heroes and students exchanged glances at Maruko, surprised to see the usually strong rabbit hero in tears. Rumi sobbed as she recounted the strange monsters that had attacked them, and Midoriya reassured her, explaining that those creatures were curses and that the finger she had encountered was a special-grade cursed object. It had the ability to gather curses and grow stronger, making it clear that the fault lay with him for picking it up. "No, Deku, it's not your fault. How could you have known it was dangerous?" Uraraka defended him, seeing the guilt in Midoriya's eyes. "It'll be all right. Someone who can help Iguchi will be here tomorrow," Midoriya told Rumi as he prepared to leave. She called out his name, but he apologized, explaining that he had somewhere else to be. As he stepped outside, Rumi lowered her head in sadness, knowing her best friend was departing. Maruko, usually playful with Midoriya, remained silent this time, her gaze fixed on the screen. The scene shifted to a crematorium where Gojo and Midoriya sat on a bench together. Midoriya shared that his grandfather had passed away, someone who had been like a father to him. He expressed his sorrow, revealing that his parents were also gone in this universe. Fatgum placed a comforting hand on Midoriya's shoulder, and he managed a small smile in return. Gojo, sensing the weight of the moment, asked if Midoriya had decided what he wanted to do. Midoriya inquired about the frequency of casualties caused by curses, to which Gojo replied that while this particular case was exceptional, such incidents were common. It was often a relief when someone died a natural death after encountering a curse. The scene shifted to a gruesome sight: a body that had been torn apart, with blood everywhere and only a broken skeleton remaining. Gojo remarked that finding a body in such a state was one of the better outcomes. The audience felt a wave of nausea wash over them, some gasping in horror, while Toga and all for one watched with delight. The heroes and students now understood the perilous nature of being a curse ability user, with a high percentage of missions leading to death compared to being a hero. Gojo warned Midoriya that if he pursued Sukuna, he would witness horrific sights, and he couldn't guarantee that Midoriya would escape unscathed. The choice was his to make. As Midoriya contemplated this, images of the hurt Megumi, crying Rumi, and bandaged Iguchi filled his mind. Inside the crematorium, he placed his grandfather's ashes into a jar, the words, "You're a strong kid, so help people," echoing in his ears. He wondered if eliminating all the parts of Sukuna would reduce the harm caused by curses. Gojo, leaning against the wall, confirmed that it would. Midoriya filled the jar and sealed it, then asked if Gojo still had the cursed finger. Gojo produced the second finger from his pocket and handed it to Midoriya, who examined it with distaste. He remarked on its disgusting appearance, and Gojo acknowledged the unpleasantness. Midoriya closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the marks appear on his face. His eyes widened, and his body began to tremble as his heartbeat quickened, palpable even to the audience. Gojo raised his arms, prepared for any sudden developments. Half the audience worried for him, while Ibra prayed for his safety, and Shigaraki hoped for the worst. Midoriya began to laugh eerily, clutching his chest. Finally, he shifted his grip to his throat, overwhelmed by the foul taste. He stuck out his tongue, exclaiming how gross it was, yet found it amusing. Gojo laughed in response, concluding that Midoriya's ability to control Sukuna was not merely physical tolerance. They hadn't seen talent like this in 1,000 years. All Might transformed into his muscular form for a brief moment before returning to his normal state. Thanks to K-19's power, he didn't bleed this time. He praised young Midoriya, encouraging him to go beyond his limits. Kirishima and Tetsu congratulated Midoriya, while Lita chimed in with her own praise. The room erupted in applause, filling the somber atmosphere with renewed energy, except for the villains and a few students. Even the pro-heroes smiled, and Shinso, who rarely showed emotion, wore a smile as well. Midoriya beamed with happiness. Turned to Gojo, noticing something off. Gojo assured him it was nothing and approached, asking if Midoriya had steeled his resolve. Midoriya bluntly replied that he still didn't understand why he had to face execution, but he couldn't ignore the curse any longer. He glanced at his grandfather's portrait, expressing his frustration about fulfilling his last request. Determined, he walked to the jar, declaring his intention to consume the rest of Sukuna, indifferent to the consequences. He was certain of how things would end for him. Gojo laughed, impressed by Midoriya's growth, and told him to be ready by the end of the day. When Midoriya asked if they were going somewhere, the door opened to reveal Fushiguro, who confirmed they were headed to Tokyo. Midoriya greeted Fushiguro enthusiastically, earning a bored response about his bandages. Fushiguro explained that Midoriya would be transferring to the same jujutsu school he attended. The audience was intrigued by the mention of jujutsu. Fushiguro described the Tokyo Metropolitan Jujutsu Technical High School, a traditional place with Japanese and Chinese architectural styles. Gojo informed Midoriya that he was one of only 3 first-year students. Midnight elaborated that there were 3 different classes, each with only 3 students. Cementos questioned the reasoning behind this, and Ectoplasm suggested it was to maintain a low profile regarding curses and jujutsu users, preventing public panic. The scene shifted to a mysterious area surrounded by trees and Buddhist architecture. Midoriya walked alongside Gojo, taking notes as Gojo explained the school's significance. Midoriya expressed surprise at how deep in the mountains they were, and Gojo reassured him that even Tokyo had such areas on its outskirts. Gojo described the school as a private religious institution that served as a base for many jujutsu sorcerers even after graduation, providing education, support, and mediation in missions. When Midoriya inquired about Fushiguro, Gojo mentioned he was resting in his room. As they approached the school gate, Gojo warned Midoriya about an upcoming interview with the principal, emphasizing the importance of making a good impression. Midoriya felt a wave of anxiety, fearing immediate rejection. The students from Class 1A experienced a sense of déjà vu, recalling a previous test with Aizawa. A familiar voice interrupted their thoughts, questioning the need for any hierarchy beyond strength. Gojo and Midoriya paused, and Midoriya noticed a mouth had formed on his face. The realization struck everyone that Sukuna was speaking through him. Midoriya covered the mouth, apologizing for its sudden appearance. Gojo remarked on the uniqueness of Midoriya's body, while the mouth shifted to his hand, with Sukuna expressing his intentions. Midoriya was taken aback by Sukuna's reputation, and Gojo explained that Sukuna was a legendary figure, once a human who became a demon lord over 1,000 years ago. The audience was horrified as the scene shifted to a fiery landscape filled with corpses, where Sukuna loomed large, grinning chaotically. K-19 noted the fear in the audience, relieved he hadn't activated the feeling sensor, which could have caused panic. Shigaraki pondered the strength of full-power Sukuna compared to Gojo. Gojo continued, explaining that sorcerers had once united their strength to challenge Sukuna but had failed, leading to his title as the King of Curses. Midoriya finally connected the dots about Sukuna's identity, prompting a discussion about Japanese mythology. Naomi speculated on the existence of mythological beings in their universe, while Midoriya asked who was stronger, Gojo or Sukuna. Gojo confidently claimed he would win, despite the potential challenge. Tsukachi noted Gojo's confidence, questioning how strong he truly was, while Beast Genist suggested they continue watching to see if Gojo would demonstrate his abilities. The fact remains that they still had no idea what his curse ability actually was. Aoyama nodded his head hesitantly as they walked up the stairs and entered a dimly lit room, illuminated only by a few candles. "You're late, Saru," a voice said. Itadori turned to see a man sewing a doll. 8 minutes late. Not late enough to get me angry, but I thought I told you to fix that habit of yours. The camera panned to reveal Principal Yaga of Jujutsu High Tokyo, a bulky man in his early 50s, even while seated. "Hey, why does his voice sound so familiar?" Edshot asked. K-19 smiled and replied that he had definitely played a game from the pre-Quirk era called Yakuza. Edshot's eyes widened in realization that the principal had the same voice as Kiryu Kazuma. Bakugo groaned, wondering if even a cool pro-hero was a nerd. Midoriya's mind short-circuited at the sight of the old man making cute dolls. Jiro laughed, confirming that this version of Midoriya was indeed similar to Kaminari. Gojo, with a plain expression, addressed the principal, saying that if it wasn't enough to be mad about, then he should cut him some slack. 8 minutes was no big deal, right? Endeavor chimed in, stating that a late arrival was still late, even if only by a second. Dabi added a comment, reminding Endeavor of the day he had been late. Principal Yaga then turned his attention to Midoriya, asking why he was there. Midoriya, looking confused, replied that it was for an interview. When the principal pressed for more details, Midoriya explained that he wanted to learn jujutsu to collect Sukuna's fingers, insisting he couldn't just leave them out there. The principal questioned why he cared, pointing out that people were dying due to crimes, accidents, and diseases in the natural course of life. Gojo smiled, recognizing the principal's familiar rhetoric. Bando noted that this was a tactic the principal used on anyone who didn't provide a satisfactory answer in an interview, and Midnight approved of the principal's effective approach. But the principal pressed further, stating that Midoriya couldn't overlook deaths caused by curses. Midoriya, feeling anger rise within him, insisted that it was someone's dying wish and he just wanted to help people. All Might felt compelled to applaud Midoriya but was interrupted by the principal's next words. "A dying wish?" Principal Yaga stood up, declaring that Midoriya would be disqualified for fighting curses simply because someone else told him to. Midoriya was taken aback by this response. In this universe, such sentiments were not praised as they might be in hero society. The heroes and everyone present realized that this world would challenge their ideals, preparing them for experiences that contradicted their beliefs. This realization also drew the villains into the unfolding narrative, indicating that the story would not always be lighthearted. Principal Yaga raised his hand, causing the doll to stand up. Everyone reacted in shock, realizing these weren't just dolls. When Midoriya asked, the principal explained that they were cursed corpses infused with his curse. With a flick of his hand, one of the dolls lunged at Midoriya. Bakugo initially mocked the principal, thinking the doll posed no threat, but his expression changed as the cursed corpse vanished and reappeared before Midoriya at incredible speed. It threw a punch, which Midoriya attempted to block with a bag, but the impact sent him flying back, crashing into a pillar. The audience gasped, and Bakugo fell silent, astonished. The doll had accomplished something that only Aizawa had managed before shutting Katsuki Bakugo down. Midoriya struggled to his feet, determined to explain that it was not just someone else's wish, it was a family member's last request. He charged at the cursed doll and delivered a powerful punch, sending it crashing back toward the principal. The doll ricocheted off the walls, gaining speed with each impact, extinguishing the candles in its path and becoming a blur in the darkness. The speed! The cursed corpse is moving as fast as I do in Gear 3, Ida confirmed. Midoriya, unable to keep up with the doll's speed in the dark, searched for its location. Suddenly, the doll launched forward and headbutted him, sending him crashing to the ground and rolling multiple times before slamming into the same pillar again. Awaze groaned, feeling inferior as he remarked on the doll from another universe being able to defeat many of them. Monoma saw an opportunity to insult Class 1A but found himself stuck sitting with Kendo and Vlad King. He planned to change his sitting position after the first 10-minute break. The principal approached Midoriya, reminding him that a family member is still someone else. The doll danced around, mocking him and pointing at its backside. Midoriya felt a rush of embarrassment as snickers echoed through the hall. Frustrated, he thought to himself that it was just a doll, incapable of feeling pain or fear. The principal explained that a jujutsu sorcerer constantly faced death, not just their own. Sometimes, one had to ignore the victims or confront the harsh realities of curses. All for One interjected, smirking as he commented on heroes being unable to make tough decisions without worrying about their image. The heroes glared at him, their anger palpable, but they refrained from acting due to K-19's presence. A few villains shivered at the thought of heroes resorting to lethal measures, aware that many of them were alive today because heroes chose not to kill. Shigaraki, in particular, was affected, recalling how pro-hero Snipe had aimed for his legs instead of a fatal shot. If Snipe had truly wanted him dead, he would have succeeded that day. The principal's glare at Midoriya was intense, though hidden behind sunglasses. He remarked that the job of a sorcerer was unpleasant and required a certain level of motivation, perhaps even madness. He questioned whether Midoriya would act on someone else's orders. Midoriya felt resentment rising within him but was interrupted by Principal Masamichi Yaga, who posed a thought-provoking question. A heavy silence filled the air as Midoriya contemplated his choices. The principal's words cut deep, suggesting that Midoriya's grandfather would be blamed if he fell victim to a curse. Ojiro noted how harsh the principal was, remarking that even Aizawa wouldn't speak so bluntly. Aizawa nodded in agreement, emphasizing that education involved helping students realize important truths. Midoriya, lost in thought, was suddenly interrupted by a cursed corpse that struck him with an uppercut, sending him spinning through the air. Shigaraki laughed heartily at the sight of Midoriya being knocked around. The principal declared that it was difficult to imagine the feelings one experiences on the brink of death, but he asserted that a jujutsu sorcerer never dies without regret. This statement struck All for One, who recalled Nana Shimura's unwavering happiness even in her final moments. He had never found satisfaction in killing one for all users, as they all died without regret. Kurojiri checked on All for One, who assured him he was fine. The cursed corpse lunged for another strike, demanding to know why they had come to Jujutsu Tech. All Might urged Midoriya to respond, while Bakugo shouted for him to take action. Midoriya clenched the fabric of his pants, reflecting on his abilities. He had always excelled in sports and battles, yet he had never considered that there might be something only he could do. As he dodged the punch, he used the momentum to launch himself toward the cursed corpse. He grabbed it and rolled on the ground, finally managing to secure it in a headlock. Tetsu cheered, punching the air, with Kirishima joining in. Midoriya, still holding the cursed corpse doll, declared that consuming Sukuna was something only he could do. Even if he managed to escape his responsibilities, he envisioned himself enjoying life eating, bathing, and reading manga. However, he quickly felt a wave of depression wash over him as he thought about the lives lost because of Sukuna. He questioned whether he could simply ignore the suffering of others. The candle flames flickered higher as he resolved not to accept that notion. Holding the doll firmly, he rejected the idea of turning a blind eye to the consequences of his actions. With determination, Midoriya stood ready for whatever came next. The new girl was surprised, but her shock quickly turned into happiness. Tetsu congratulated her with a firm handshake, while Vlad King felt a sense of pride, noting that another student from their world was part of the story. Outside the train station, the girl reached her destination. The scene showed her dressed in the Jujutsu high uniform, which included a skirt. Mineta couldn't help but admire her appearance, commenting on how she seemed to have a more impressive figure than in their world. Saori-chan's voice rang out, and the girl looked around, taking in the bustling view of people walking and enjoying various treats from the shops lining the streets. She smiled, clearly happy to be in such a lively place. Mr. Compress wondered when one of them would make an appearance, prompting Bakugo to mockingly laugh and suggest it would be when the villains showed up. Koda and Kaibara joined in the laughter, but Shigaraki scolded them to stop. Minoma stood up, asserting that Bakugo was speaking the truth, which earned him a grin. Kendo chimed in, teasing Minoma about his tendency to speak out. Meanwhile, Midoriya and Fushiguro were waiting outside. Fushiguro stood near the road while Midoriya sat on the railing, enjoying a popsicle. Midoriya questioned why there were only 3 first years, wondering if that was too few. Fushiguro explained the rarity of jujutsu sorcerers, pointing out that it was unusual to find someone who could see curses. Midoriya recalled Fushiguro mentioning he was the 3rd entry, but Fushiguro clarified that the last entry had only been decided recently. Midoriya pondered the implications of so many curses and so few sorcerers, realizing it would be a challenging job. Hawks expressed his concern about the commonality of death in their world, while Endeavor shared his unsettling gut feeling that something bad was on the horizon. Tokoyami agreed, echoing the sentiment. Toga, with a twisted grin, expressed her desire to see people perish, which prompted Uraraka to object, calling her one of the worst people she knew. Toga responded with a flirtatious smile, thanking Uraraka for the compliment. Back in the story, Fushiguro continued, explaining that their school had unique circumstances. Gojo arrived, waving and apologizing for the wait. He noted that their uniforms had arrived on time, and Midoriya confirmed that his fit perfectly, though it was slightly different from Fushiguro's. Gojo explained that uniforms could be customized upon request, which surprised Midoriya since he hadn't made any requests. Gojo admitted he had placed the custom order. Power Loader then expressed his concern, hoping this world wouldn't have a version of Mei Hatsum. Best Jeanist pointed out that this world's Midoriya wore hoodies frequently, likely the reason for the red hoodie on his uniform. Sato noticed that this Midoriya had red shoes, prompting everyone to look at his footwear on the screen. Kaminari joked that some things never changed, while Midoriya's face turned as red as Kirishima's hair. Bakugo laughed harder than ever before, and Pixie Bob winked at Midoriya, complimenting his color combination. Miruko and Mandalay rolled their eyes at Pixie Bob's antics. Midoriya, holding his red hoodie, expressed indifference, while Fushiguro noted Gojo's tendency for such antics. Aizawa felt sympathy for Fushiguro, who had to endure Gojo's childish behavior. Ms. Joke teased Aizawa, suggesting he was experienced in such matters, to which he replied that she was one of those people too. Fushiguro then asked why they were meeting in Harajuku, and Gojo explained it was the girl's request. Midoriya excitedly asked for popcorn, prompting Siro to joke about him being a cinnamon roll, even in this universe. On the footpath, a man in a gray 3-piece suit approached a young woman with a smile, inquiring if she was on the clock. She replied that she wasn't, and he offered her his business card, looking for potential models. Pony commented that she would have declined the offer, wondering what the others would have chosen in her place. Momo, overhearing the conversation, expressed her frustration about her own modeling experience, calling it the biggest mistake of her life. The new student watched the scene unfold. The young woman, in a hurry, walked away faster, and the man tried to stop her but failed. Just as he was about to leave, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw a girl of average height with a slim figure. She had mid-length brown hair styled with bangs, orange eyes, and a face resembling Ochako Uraraka. She pointed to herself, asking what he thought about her for the modeling gig. The man, sweating in fear, stumbled over his words, trying to excuse himself from the situation. Fushiguro and Midoriya observed the encounter from a distance, intrigued by the unfolding drama. He was in a hurry and attempted to walk away, but she grabbed him by the back of his collar. She insisted that he not run from her and demanded he come out and say it. Midnight and Miruko exchanged amused glances, enjoying the assertive side of Uraraka. Feeling their gaze, Uraraka swallowed nervously. Midoriya commented on the situation, noting they were about to talk to her. The man tried to escape but was held back by her grip. He pleaded for her to let him go, expressing his regret. Midoriya and Fushiguro watched the scene unfold. Midoriya, holding popcorn and a taco while wearing sunglasses that seemed to spell Rook, shook his head in disbelief. Bakugo teased Midoriya about his sunglasses, while Uraraka took a jab at Bakugo's hairstyle, which had been styled by Best Jeanist. Bakugo retorted sharply, and Shigaraki chimed in, humorously confirming Uraraka's point. Bakugo shot back at Shigaraki, and twice enthusiastically supported his boss. Midoriya felt embarrassed by the situation, prompting Fushiguro to scoff at him. Rin giggled softly, and Jiro seized the moment to poke fun at Kaminari, suggesting he would have been a better fit for the situation. Kaminari, feeling defeated, acknowledged her point, while Mineta agreed with Jiro. Kaminari playfully retaliated by slapping the back of Mineta's head. Gojo called out to them, waving his hand. Two girls walked behind him, complimenting his blndfld. One remarked on its attractiveness, while another agreed it looked cool. Death Arms questioned how Gojo could see with the blndfld, and Inlady speculated that he must have heightened senses. Midnight took a playful jab at MT Lady, who confidently defended her intelligence. They exchanged playful banter, with K-19 suggesting a fight between them, eliciting creepy smiles from both women. Kinoko shivered at the thought, while Toga felt a thrill from their excitement. Spinner expressed his annoyance at their self-centeredness, and Kamui Wood and Aizawa shook their heads at their childish behavior. Naomi glanced at K-19, who gulped nervously under her gaze and telepathically apologized for his excitement. Back to the story, she locked the locker and Gojo repeated his earlier statement. With her head held high and a confident demeanor, she introduced herself as Nobara Kujisaki, insisting the boys should feel honored to be in her presence. Aoyama commented on her demanding nature, noting the contrast between her and their version of Uraraka. Momo pointed out the differences in personalities between the two Midoriyas, highlighting how their traits varied. Bondo expressed his eagerness to see who else would appear, noting that no one from Class 1B had shown up yet. Nobara scrutinized the group, and Midoriya introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya from Sendai, followed by Fushiguro's introduction. Nobara's gaze sharpened as she assessed them, finding Midoriya overly enthusiastic and loud, which she found annoying. She then scrutinized Fushiguro, dismissing him as a high and mighty type and imagining him engaging in destructive behavior. With a sigh, Nobara lamented her situation, prompting Todoroki to comment on her quick judgment based on appearances. Lita admonished Uraraka for judging someone at first glance, while Present Mike reminded him that he had also prejudged Midoriya during the entrance exam. Tetsu and Kirishima joined in, criticizing Lita's behavior as unmanly. Hagakure questioned their repetitive remarks, and Kamakiri expressed his exhaustion over their constant use of the word manly. Mina defended her friend, asserting that Tetsu was great. Midoriya pointed out Nobara's quick judgment, leading Fushiguro to ask Gojo if they were going anywhere. Gojo excitedly announced that they would be going on a tour of Tokyo, given that they had all three of them together, especially since two were from the countryside. Both Midoriya and Nobara were filled with excitement, joyfully shouting, "Tokyo!" multiple times. They gazed at each other with wide, hopeful eyes, smiling brightly while clasping their hands together. Everyone around them shared a similar thought, bewildered by their enthusiasm. Fushiguro reacted not to their antics but to Gojo's mention of a Tokyo tour. Nobara bounced up and down like a child who had just received a birthday gift. Midoriya jumped and hugged Gojo, gently caressing his cheeks, to which Gojo responded with a warm smile. Mirio expressed his disbelief, noting how Nobara's personality had shifted dramatically in an instant. Ragdoll found it heartwarming, while Uraraka held her face in surprise at Nobara's behavior. Mina's eyes sparkled with excitement, sensing a budding chemistry between the two. Hagakure took it a step further, commenting on how similar their personalities were. Beneath their confident exteriors, both Uraraka and Nobara shared an infectious enthusiasm, which made her giggle at the thought of pairing them together. Mina shared the same sentiment. K-19, sensing the thoughts of those around, asked Naomi if she should inform them that there would be no romance between Midoriya and Kujisaki. Naomi whispered that it was best to let them figure it out themselves. Jiro rolled her eyes, suggesting that Mina should be the one to pair with Kujisaki instead of Uraraka. Mina pouted, confused by the comment. Jiro explained that Mina's personality mirrored that of Kujisaki, both sharing a similar level of mischief. Aizawa sighed, feeling a sense of foreboding about the dynamic between Midoriya, Nobara, and Gojo, recognizing that Fushiguro would likely have to manage their antics as the most mature member of the group. Nobara exclaimed her eagerness to visit Tokyo Disneyland, to which Midoriya corrected her, pointing out that Disneyland was in Chiba. Midoriya then suggested they go to Chinatown, but Nobara quickly retorted that Chinatown was in Yokohama. Midoriya insisted that Yokohama was part of Tokyo, urging her to check a map. Their playful argument escalated, voices rising as they bickered like children. Shuji remarked on how surprising it was to see Midoriya and Uraraka arguing, noting that they usually treated each other with kindness. Both Midoriya and Uraraka exchanged glances, a hint of blush coloring their cheeks. Gojo interrupted their playful squabble, announcing their destination. Immediately, both Midoriya and Nobara stopped and knelt on one knee, treating Gojo with exaggerated reverence. A new day dawned, the sky filled with dark clouds as rain fell gently. The scene shifted back to the previous detention center, where a dark-haired man in a black suit and glasses stood outside. He noted that 90% of the area had been successfully evacuated, prompting Mr. Compress to realize that this man had the same voice as the narrator from before. Midoriya, Fushiguro, and Nobara stood beside him, and Uraraka pointed them out as the main cast. Bakugo growled, questioning who had deemed them the main characters, asserting that he had yet to make his appearance. Uraraka playfully argued that it was obvious based on the typical story patterns, suggesting that Bakugo was merely an extra. Laughter filled the hallway as Bakugo scoffed at her. Monoma, with an air of arrogance, claimed he would be the main character instead. The man in glasses, identified as Ijichi by Midoriya, continued explaining that the area had been evacuated to ensure civilian safety. 13 and Shinso agreed, acknowledging the efforts made to secure the area. Midoriya asked Ijichi about the term window, to which Ijichi explained that a window was a member of Jujutsu Tech who could see curses, though they were not sorcerers. Midoriya nodded in understanding, and Ijichi signaled for them to continue as the scene shifted to detainee block at present. 5 of them remained near the curse womb. As he spoke, the screen slowly zoomed in. Ryukyu observed the curse womb, commenting on its unsettling appearance, and wondered what exactly a curse womb was. Ijichi explained that if this curse womb was of the type that metamorphoses, it would likely become a special-grade cursed spirit. Momo expressed her concern, questioning why 3 rookie students were sent to confront such a formidable entity instead of an experienced sorcerer. Midoriya, feeling anxious, contemplated the implications of facing a special-grade curse. He recalled Ijichi's earlier narration about the dangers involved, fearing that one of them might not make it out alive. All Might and Aizawa shared the same apprehension, while Nobara and Fushiguro silently echoed the sentiment. Midoriya admitted his confusion about what special grade truly meant, prompting sighs of exasperation from Fushiguro and Nobara. Mandalay acknowledged Ijichi's earlier remarks about Gojo's teaching methods, while Ectoplasm expressed a sense of satisfaction in being right about Gojo's questionable teaching skills. Endeavor voiced his frustration, questioning how Gojo became a teacher and why the higher-ups allowed it. Ijichi then offered to simplify the explanation. An imaginary presentation board appeared, and Ijichi used a hologram projector to illustrate his points. Ojiro marveled at the ability to use curse techniques for explanations, while K-19 clarified that it was merely Ijichi's imagination. Ijichi outlined the conventional weapons against cursed spirits, starting with grade 4, where a wooden bat sufficed. He continued, explaining that a handgun would be adequate for grade 3, while a shotgun would be a close call for grade 1, even a tank might not be enough, and for special grade curses, one might only stand a chance with extensive bombardment. Midoriya reacted with alarm, realizing the gravity of the situation. Fushiguro noted that typically, a sorcerer on par with the curse would handle such missions, and on a day like today, that would be Gojo. Kaibara expressed disappointment, realizing that aside from Gojo and a select few, others were not as strong as he had presumed. Power Loader clarified that Ijichi was explaining things from a non-sorcerer's perspective, while Tsukachi added that it illustrated the challenges faced by non-special grade sorcerers against special grade curses. Mina struggled to grasp the concept, prompting Momo to simplify it using an analogy involving quirks. She explained that a quirkless person would struggle against a tank, while a quirk user could face the tank but would encounter similar difficulties when matched against a stronger quirk user. Kaibara finally understood, though Kaminari lamented the overwhelming amount of information. Midoriya searched for Gojo, and Fushiguro informed him that Gojo was away on business, not someone who would linger at school. A flashback revealed Gojo's departure, reminding Fushiguro not to expect souvenirs. Aizawa compared Gojo's teaching to All Might's brief appearances at UA, noting that after fulfilling his teaching duties, Gojo would leave for patrols. All Might sighed, reminiscing about the past, which weighed heavily on Midoriya, who doubted his own capabilities. Ijichi reassured them that their line of work often lacked manpower, and they would frequently have to undertake missions beyond their abilities. However, he emphasized that this particular case was urgent and abnormal. He warned them not to engage in combat under any circumstances, advising that when confronted by a special-grade curse, they should either flee or face dire consequences. Lita's eyes widened in concern as Ijichi's earlier words echoed in his mind, while Mina bit her tongue, fearing for the worst. Recovery Girl expressed her frustration, asserting that inexperienced rookies should not be sent on such missions without a seasoned professional accompanying them. Hawks quietly muttered about the higher-ups, which worried Nobara and Midoriya. Cura Girl urged them to heed their fears and reminded them that their mission was strictly to verify and rescue survivors. Suddenly, a woman in her mid-40s approached the gate, asking about her son, Tadashi. The guards attempted to keep her back, but she insisted on knowing if her son was safe. Midnight recognized Mandalay and congratulated her, noting that two of their own had appeared in the unfolding story. The woman continued to plead for information, but the guards remained firm, and Midoriya felt a pang of sadness as she cried out for her son. Ijichi stepped in front of Midoriya, urging the woman to stay back for her safety, explaining the potential danger of poisonous gas in the area. Shocked by this revelation, she fell to her knees, overwhelmed with despair. Mandalay felt a deep understanding of her counterparts' emotions, having experienced similar feelings just moments ago when the curse had taken Kuda hostage. Tiger, Pixie Bob, and Ragdoll shared her concern as they watched a version of their teammate in distress. Midoriya took a deep breath, releasing it slowly as he clenched his fist in determination. Inspired by this, he made a confident declaration to Mandalay, vowing to save her son just as he had saved Kuda. With renewed resolve, Midoriya slammed his fist into his palm, his confidence radiating from him. He called out to Fushiguro and Kujisaki, rallying them to join him in their mission to rescue those in danger. Nobara agreed wholeheartedly, her own expression reflecting determination. Fushiguro remained stoic, unfazed by the situation. Siro cheered them on, and a few other students joined in, while Bakugo scoffed but couldn't hide a slight smirk, acknowledging Midoriya's willingness to protect others. Meanwhile, Monoma felt a pang of jealousy as he watched Midoriya and Uraraka receive admiration from their peers. Nizu's tail stood straight, a clear sign of his anger, as he had already deduced the reason the higher-ups had sent 3 rookies on such a perilous mission. Mandalay smiled as she observed Midoriya, recognizing their shared trait of prioritizing others' safety above their own. She expressed her gratitude, noting that Midoriya had not only saved Kuda but had also changed him for the better. Todoroki and Aizawa exchanged glances, noticing Fushiguro's lack of reaction, leading them to wonder about his motivations. They were puzzled by his actions, questioning why he had chosen to save Midoriya if he seemed indifferent to protecting others. As they prepared to move forward, Ijichi cautioned them to be careful. He began chanting an incantation, raising 2 fingers. The atmosphere shifted as darkness enveloped the area, creating a protective barrier. Reiko smiled at the detail, intrigued by the use of chants. Tokoyami asked Kozai about Reiko's excitement for the paranormal, and Kozai explained her fascination with such things. As the barrier expanded, Kuwaro questioned its nature, while K-19 encouraged them to keep watching. Midoriya noticed the darkening sky and Fushiguro clarified that it was a veil, designed to conceal them from the outside world. Mineta expressed his amazement, while Melissa and Naomi discussed the benefits of the veil in preventing civilian casualties and keeping curses contained. Shigaraki scoffed at the idea, suggesting that it would have prevented interference from other pro-heroes. Ojiro teased Shigaraki, prompting a growl in response. Midoriya marveled at the situation, while Nobara dismissed his enthusiasm as ignorance. Megumi summoned his divine dog from the shadows, which howled, eliciting excitement from Midoriya. Megumi explained that the dog would alert them if a curse approached. Midoriya approached the dog, ruffling its fur and expressing his trust in it. Feeling left out, playfully pouted at Aizawa, who dismissed the notion of reciprocating the gesture. As the group moved forward, Fushiguro signaled them to stop, noticing something unusual. They looked up in surprise, questioning the size of their surroundings. Dabi scratched his head, uncertain, while Midoriya speculated about the nature of the space. Twice chimed in with a snicker, and Nobara stuttered her guess about the structure being a maisonette. Mineta sighed in relief, but Cementos disagreed, criticizing the design as chaotic and childlike. Fushiguro finally realized they were in an innate domain created from cursed energy, a sight he had never encountered before. Pony inquired about the meaning of domain, and Tokage speculated it was a type of cursed ability. Nizu, usually knowledgeable, found himself puzzled, which shocked everyone around him. Fushiguro instructed them to watch the door, but they were taken aback to find it completely blocked by pipes and metal, leaving them with a sense of foreboding about what lay ahead. The door had vanished, and Midoriya expressed his concern. Tokage, adjusting her hair with confidence, acknowledged that Midoriya was right about the cursed ability. Nobara, bewildered, asked how this could happen since they had just entered through that door. The students, pro-heroes, and others present grew increasingly worried for their safety. However, their expressions quickly shifted to disbelief. Midoriya and Nobara began to circle each other, gesturing animatedly, their anxiety manifesting in a comical manner. They were at a loss for what to do. Toga found their antics hilarious, causing many to fall from their seats in laughter. Kendo shouted in frustration, pointing out how ridiculous their behavior was in contrast to the seriousness of the situation. Jiro lamented that they were even more chaotic than Jaminye and Mina. Midoriya and Uraraka felt embarrassed, their faces turning red as they watched their peers act foolishly. Bakugo, Twice, Shigaraki, and Minoma joined in Toga's laughter, unable to contain themselves. Izawa, shaking his head, questioned whose students they were. Fushiguro, trying to regain focus, reminded everyone that the dog could lead them back to the entrance. The two girls clasped their hands together, blushing at the sight of the dog, which emitted a bright glow from behind them. Dark Shadow, overwhelmed by the light, shielded his face, grumbling about its brightness. Midoriya hugged the demon dog, affectionately ruffling its fur, while Nobara praised the dog, offering it jerky. Mina agreed, her eyes sparkling with admiration for the adorable creature. Fushiguro, frustrated, shouted at them to calm down, but Midoriya reassured him, expressing gratitude for his dependability. Fushiguro, taken aback by the compliment, suggested they keep moving. Sato teased that Fushiguro reminded him of Aizawa and Todoroki, a sentiment Endeavor echoed. Aizawa and Todoroki ignored the banter, prompting Endeavor to call out to Todoroki. Meanwhile, Dabi silently observed Endeavor, feeling a growing irritation at his voice and wishing for the situation to end. The trio continued deeper into the building, following the demon dog through corridors and up several floors. The dog paused, sniffing the air before leading them into a waterless swimming pool. Tetsu questioned the oddity of a corridor leading to a swimming pool, and as they entered, Midoriya and Nobara gasped in shock, while Fushiguro maintained a stoic expression. Midoriya rushed to the edge of the pool for a closer look, his eyes widening in horror at the sight before him. The audience shared his shock, except for the villains, who wore twisted smiles. Spinner remained impassive, while Toga drooled in anticipation. Shigaraki scratched his neck, excitement evident on his face, and Dabi snickered. A body lay against the wall, gruesomely dismembered, its skeletal remains grotesquely posed. The atmosphere turned heavy with silence, broken only by Shigaraki's laughter. After a tense pause, the screen resumed, revealing Nobara's frightened whisper about the atrocity. Fushiguro recalled that there were 3 prisoners, and Midoriya examined the label on the body, revealing the name, Tadashi Okazaki. The memory of the woman's voice echoed in his mind. Mandalay gasped, realizing the implications of the discovery. Midoriya felt a wave of guilt wash over him, recognizing that he had failed to fulfill his promise to her counterpart. All Might noticed his distress and planned to address it during the break. Midoriya resolved to bring the body back, declaring his intention. Nobara questioned this decision, but Midoriya insisted that the woman deserved to know the truth about her son. Lita supported Midoriya, emphasizing the need for transparency. Surprisingly, even Minoma agreed, marking a rare moment of unity among the students. Endeavor's expression turned somber as he reflected on his own lost son. Just then, Fushiguro pulled Midoriya back from the corpse, his voice firm and commanding as he insisted they needed to find the remaining prisoners. The room erupted in protests, students expressing disbelief and anger at Fushiguro's words. The tension in the air was palpable as they grappled with the gravity of their situation. They turned around, and the entrance they had used was gone. Midoriya expressed his frustration, insisting that they wouldn't be able to return for it later. Fushiguro, displaying his cold demeanor, responded that he never intended for them to come back. He suggested they leave it behind. This sparked outrage among the pro-heroes, who shouted angrily at the screen. The tension escalated when Fushiguro made a shocking statement, declaring that the person in question wasn't even worth saving alive, questioning why he would save a dead body. The atmosphere grew heavy with anger, causing even the villains, except for All for One, to struggle to breathe under the pressure. For the first time, the villains felt fear from the heroes. All Might transformed into his muscular form, his fury evident as he confronted the situation. The students had never seen him this angry before. Many of the pro-heroes expressed their outrage, questioning Fushiguro's mindset. Spinner, filled with rage, felt the temperature rising in his head as he compared Fushiguro to the fake heroes, claiming that sorcerers were even worse. The tension among Class 1A and others escalated, with many feeling that if they encountered Fushiguro in person, they would tear him apart. Midoriya clenched. His fists, shaking with rage, his eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. Green electricity began to spark around him, catching Miruko's attention. She looked at him with concern, asking if he was all right. The worry in her voice resonated with everyone else, who turned their attention to Midoriya. All Might called out to him, but Midoriya remained unresponsive, his gaze fixed on the screen. Pixie Bob, who usually clung to him, backed away, sensing the change in his demeanor. The rest of Class 1A grew increasingly worried for their classmate, who usually radiated kindness and positivity but was now exhibiting the opposite behavior. Bakugo, Lita, and Uraraka tried to get his attention, but he remained silent, lost in his thoughts. Finally, Aizawa's shout broke through to Midoriya, causing the green electricity to dissipate as he returned to his senses. He looked around, confused, asking what had happened and why everyone was staring at him. Everyone shook their heads, changing the subject to avoid discussing the tension. Toga expressed her confusion about the situation, and the rest of the League of Villains shared her bewilderment. All for One and Kurogi observed Midoriya with keen interest, noting the shift in his demeanor. Mineta shivered, realizing how intimidating Midoriya could be when angered, while Kaminari vowed to avoid provoking him in the future. Minoma made a mental note to be cautious when teasing him. Midoriya turned to Fushiguro, grabbing his collar and demanding to know what he meant by saying someone wasn't worth saving. Fushiguro sighed and explained that they were in a juvenile detention center, where jujutsu sorcerers had access to all information beforehand. He showed a report on a tablet about Tadashi, revealing that he had hit a little girl while driving without a license, marking his second offense. Midoriya's eyes widened at the revelation. He acknowledged Fushiguro's perspective on saving people but questioned what would happen if someone he saved went on to harm others. Edgeshot disagreed, asserting that it was wrong to abandon anyone, even a criminal. Twice scoffed at this, and Itadori, feeling angered, asked why Fushiguro had bothered saving him. For a moment, Fushiguro remained silent, their glares intensifying as they held each other's collars. Todoroki and others shared the same thought, wondering why Fushiguro had saved Midoriya. Even Nizu and All for One were puzzled. Nobara stepped closer, scolding them to consider the time and place, but before she could finish, a small hole opened beneath her, causing her to fall inside as it closed behind her. Everyone gasped in surprise, with Kinoko stuttering in disbelief. Kirishima repeated that the hole had closed, and Uraraka's shock was evident. Midoriya and Aizawa grew anxious for Uraraka's safety, looking toward the direction where she had fallen. Midoriya hesitated, calling her name with confusion, while Fushiguro realized it was the curse's doing. They turned their attention to the wall on the left, where a demon dog lay lifeless, its eyes blank and bleeding. The sight of the dog, so brutally treated, affected everyone deeply, more so than the earlier incident. Shigaraki felt a rush of memories about his own dog, causing him to flinch. Mina, Hagakure, and Pony expressed their sorrow, lamenting the fate of the innocent creature. Nizu recalled his past experiences with pets that had suffered cruel fates, and a sense of dread filled the room. Many were shaking with fear, while others were overwhelmed by sadness and anxiety. Toga, however, wore a manic expression, reveling in the gruesome scene before her. I decided to upload episode 5 this month to celebrate my honeymoon with Naomi for our second wedding anniversary in July. This is why only one chapter will be released next month. For the release date, please check the end of the chapters as usual. As mentioned, I will be addressing some of your comments in the break chapters. Here are a few I selected. Deathly Hollow 104 wondered if Bakugo was Sukuna in this universe. The response clarified that he is not, and the decision on his character is still pending. MBS_41 expressed concern about a character knowing Sukuna's name, as he does not exist in their universe. The reply indicated that another commenter had already addressed this. Joker J75 noted that the characters were fortunate not to be in the Invincible universe, to which the response was a light-hearted acknowledgement. WG_writing 1765 made a humorous remark about a character's fate, and the response encouraged keeping the fun alive without spoilers. Deathly Hollow 104 appreciated the proper use of the word gay, and the response explained its meaning as light-hearted and carefree. If you want your questions and comments to be featured, please comment while reading the chapters, highlighting specific phrases and scenes you enjoyed. Break Chapter 1. Thinking and Worried. Todoroki asked Bakugo what he thought about their universe. Bakugo quickly responded that it was filled with weaklings in terms of power, which made it dangerous since, apart from sorcerers and curses, others could not defend themselves. Todoroki nodded in agreement, acknowledging the significant danger for non-sorcerers, as any civilian could fall victim to curses. As everyone exited the hallway following K-19 and Naomi, they were astonished by the luxurious surroundings. The expansive area included a large dining room, shops, restrooms, a lounge filled with couches, a bar, a kitchen, and even gaming rooms. Naomi informed them that the total area spanned over 58 million square meters, more than 3 times the size of the largest shopping mall in their world and 2.5 times that of the biggest mall in Bakugo's world. She explained that everything they could desire, including advanced technology far superior to their own, was available. Uraraka was left speechless, while Momo felt embarrassed, realizing that even her father could not afford such a place. David Shield asked K-19 how much it cost to create this magnificent establishment. K-19 revealed that it was over $200 trillion, leaving everyone in shock. K-19 encouraged them to explore the area, presenting them with a small device that would allow them to teleport anywhere within the premises. He explained how to use it and reminded them they had only 10 minutes to explore before the time began. With that, both Naomi and K-19 vanished. Mirio joked about the surprising experience, prompting everyone to scatter except for Midoriya, All Might, and Midnight. Midnight inquired about Midoriya's feelings regarding the execution part and the burden of having Sukuna. Midoriya hesitated, struggling to articulate his thoughts. Midnight, displaying her nurturing side, embraced him, leaving Midoriya confused. She then gently reminded him of the heavy responsibility he carried, expressing her understanding of the disturbing nature of his situation. She reassured him that everything would turn out fine in the end. Midoriya expressed his gratitude for her support, smiling as All Might stood beside him, also smiling. Midnight playfully warned All Might not to share her softer side, to which he surrendered with a chuckle. Meanwhile, Aizawa and Mike observed the interaction from a distance, feeling a twinge of sadness as they recognized Midnight's motivations, recalling her past experiences. Kirishima, Tetsu, and several other boys from classes 1A and 1B sat on the couches, munching on chips they had taken from the stores. Kirishima remarked on the wildness of the recent events, while Tetsu expressed hope that Midoriya would regain control. Kirishima shared his worries, prompting Kaminari to encourage a more positive outlook. Shota agreed, noting that excessive worry was not beneficial, and they all nodded in agreement. In the kitchen, Lunch Rush prepared various types of sushi for a revolving conveyor belt, with Naomi providing all the necessary ingredients. In the air-conditioned room, several male pro-heroes engaged in discussion. Vault King admitted that their world was incredibly dangerous, recalling the gruesome deaths they had witnessed. Endeavor nodded in agreement, while Ectoplasm expressed his concerns about Satoru Gojo, finding him annoying. Edge Shot echoed this sentiment, rolling his eyes at the mention of Gojo. Hound Dog entered with hot chocolate for everyone, taking a seat with his own cup, acknowledging Gojo's strength despite his irritating personality. Death Arm leaned down on the table, slamming his hand on his palm like a seal on a stamp, declaring that a certain individual could easily enter the top 10 if he were in their world. Everyone shrugged their shoulders with an irritated scoff. Mineta and Awaze were walking out of the game station when Awaze complimented Mineta, expressing surprise at how fun he was to be around. Mineta, feeling confident, remarked that aside from Kaminari, no one had ever tried to see how enjoyable he could be. Awaze suggested that once they returned to their home world, they should hang out together during every break after classes, just the three of them. Mineta smiled in approval, agreeing that it sounded fun. As they exited the game station, they spotted Ciro, who was looking around for something. Awaze greeted Ciro with a wave and Ciro waved back. Mineta asked Ciro what he was searching for, to which Ciro replied that he was looking for Lita, who had been missing since they left the screens. Mineta and Awaze shook their heads in response. Meanwhile, Lita was in the washroom of a nearby stay-room, standing in front of the mirror. Flashbacks of his encounter with Saori played in his mind, accompanied by Recovery Girl and Gran Torino's words about discrimination. He pondered the risks they took as pro-heroes to save people from villains, dangers, and disasters. However, he questioned what it meant when some of those they saved later abused others for being quirkless or having uncontrollable quirks. Doubts about the meaning of their efforts began to surface. Separately, Spinner and Shuji leaned against the walls of a photo booth, where Spinner had just shared his backstory and was eager to hear Shuji's. He asked Shuji if he had faced discrimination too, to which Shuji nodded. Spinner continued, inquiring about Shuji's experiences. Shuji sighed, explaining that he came from a village that was still quite primitive, with old-fashioned thinking. He revealed that his entire family was hated because of his mutated appearance, with scars on his face given to him by others. Sadness filled his eyes as he described how suffocating the hate felt, even though no one had tried to kill him. However, he found acceptance at Yua, laughing softly as he expressed his newfound freedom. Spinner shared that he felt the same in the League of Villains, where he was accepted for who he was. He explained that he joined the League to change society by recreating it from the ground up. Shuji disagreed, stating that such a path would only create more fear. Spinner challenged him, asking if he had a better idea. Shuji confidently replied that he aimed to become the best hero he could be, proving to the world that appearances do not define a person. Spinner chuckled, acknowledging that they shared the same goal of changing society but had different paths to achieve it. They shook hands, wishing each other luck in their endeavors. Afterward, Spinner returned to the bar where the villains were seated and drinking. Mr. Compress questioned where he had been for the last 5 minutes, and Spinner explained he had been talking to a student about his experience with a mutation quirk. Noticing Toga's silence and deep thoughts, Spinner asked her what was wrong. Toga expressed her anger at the similarities between their world and the one they were observing, particularly regarding discrimination. Spinner agreed, sharing his disdain for selfish individuals who used their power for personal gain rather than helping others. Twice, feeling the weight of anger, broke a glass on the ground, drawing everyone's attention. He laughed bitterly, recalling how a certain hero had claimed that even criminals deserved a second chance. He expressed his frustration at being labeled a criminal for an accident and how it had ruined his life. Despite completing his sentence, he found himself shunned everywhere, unable to restart his life. Toga hugged him, and Mr. Compress patted his back, assuring him that they understood. This gesture calmed Twice, who wiped his tears and wondered where their boss and master were. Toga looked around, searching for them as well. Mina, Uraraka, Bakugo, and Todoroki from Class 1A, along with Setsuna, Kurwaro, Kendo, and Kamakari from Class 1B, walked together inside a shopping mall. Bakugo noticed Mina's sadness and asked her what was wrong. Mina replied that she was thinking about Mr. Ajichi and what he had narrated last time. She worried that it might actually come true. Bakugo pointed out that it was the boy with the pointy hair whose life was at risk, not Deku, at least not yet. Uraraka looked downcast, expressing her concern for the boy, despite his earlier statements about not saving others. She felt he was a good person and reminded everyone that Deku was safe thanks to his request to Gojo. Kurwaro added that if Sukuna killed Fushiguro, the higher-ups would have a perfect reason to execute Midoria. Mina and Uraraka's expressions turned serious at his words. Mina thought desperately about Midoriya's safety, while Uraraka wished he would wake up and stop Sukuna. Bakugo felt shame wash over him as he reflected on how he had bullied Midoriya since childhood. He wanted to apologize but felt he hadn't earned the right to do so yet, even though he knew Midoriya had already forgiven him. Setsuna tried to lighten the mood by recalling their main character's arguments from the theater. She reminded them that main characters typically don't die in stories. Uraraka smiled at this, feeling reassured that they were worrying for nothing. Bakugo, however, interrupted, insisting he would be the main character, even if he wasn't the first. Uraraka laughed, teasing him about his lack of qualities for being the main character, suggesting he might be more suited to being a villain or an extra. Bakugo's frustration grew, and he attempted to unleash his quirk, only to remember they couldn't use it in the mall. Their playful bickering continued, and Kendo observed the scene with amusement, appreciating Setsuna's ability to divert their thoughts from negativity. Mina thanked Setsuna for uplifting the mood, and Kamakari chuckled at their antics. Meanwhile, in a cafe, the Lady, Mandalay, Ryukyu, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, and 13 sat together, with Miruko joining them unexpectedly. MT Lady commented on how creepy Sukuna was, while Pixie Bob expressed her frustration over how Sukuna's presence overshadowed Midoriya's cuteness. Mandalay sighed, exasperated by Pixie Bob's focus on trivial matters. Ryukyu voiced her concern for both Midoriya and Fushiguro, fearing that if Midoriya couldn't regain control, Fushiguro would be in grave danger. 13 expressed sympathy for Midoriya, and the atmosphere turned somber. Miruko, sensing the heaviness, decided to cheer everyone up, confidently stating that her friend would make it through. Laughter filled the cafe, and Ragdoll encouraged everyone to remain hopeful. Meanwhile, Power Loader, Melissa, David, and May examined machines and technology in a showroom garage, discussing their findings. Nizu sat nearby, deep in thought about the events they had witnessed just moments ago. He reflected on the higher-ups in their world, realizing they were similar to the Hero Public Safety Commission, perhaps even worse. He felt anger rise within him as he considered their desire to eliminate young Izuku simply for possessing Sukuna's soul, ignoring the fact that he was just an innocent child. Nizu's thoughts shifted to the tragic fate of Fushiguro's dog, bringing back memories of his own lost companions. He fought back tears, reminding himself to stay strong and focused on solving the problems within the Hero Society. He believed the next generation would be the key to creating a better future. Meanwhile, Dabi stood atop a fence, gazing down at the water below. He felt an unexpected sympathy for Midoriya, wondering if he saw a reflection of his younger self in the boy. Dabi clenched his fists, recalling how his dreams had been shattered by Endeavor and Shoto. He vowed to find relief only through vengeance. Elsewhere, a figure observed a TV monitor as Tokoyami approached with an ice cream. She thanked him for bringing her the flavor she had requested, and he nodded before leaving her alone. She looked at the TV and sighed, hoping Aizu would be okay. In the casino, Shigaraki and All for One sat across from each other, with Kurogyari dealing cards. All for One noticed Shigaraki's annoyance and commented on it. Shigaraki expressed his frustration about being called Tenko and feeling powerless. All for One reminded him that they couldn't use their quirks in this place, and even if they could, they were no match for their opponent, who seemed godlike in comparison. Kurogyari sensed the tension and pointed out that All for One shared Shigaraki's disdain for their situation. Shigaraki revealed his desire to be a demon lord, but felt constrained by having to follow orders from someone he deemed unworthy. Kurogyari then inquired about All for One's reaction to Gojo's revelation about Sukuna being a demon god and king of curses. All for One acknowledged his dislike for the situation, noting that Sukuna had achieved his status a millennium ago and was poised to do so again in Midoriya's body if they failed to stop him. Shigaraki scoffed at the thought of Sukuna being remembered after so long. As their break time approached, the three of them left the casino to join the other villains at the bar. Meanwhile, Nijire noticed Mirio's distress and asked what was wrong. Mirio expressed his worry for Midoriya, and Nijire reassured him with a smile, though Amajiki could see her own doubts reflected in her words. Hawks had locked himself in a restroom, contemplating the day's events without interruption. He felt uneasy about the unsettling similarities between this world and their own, particularly the higher-ups wanting to eliminate Midoriya just as the HPSC did in their reality. He realized that K-19 had brought them here to highlight these parallels and feared the consequences if the truth about the HPSC was uncovered. After ensuring the camera was deactivated, he felt a sense of relief and exited the restroom. K-19 and Naomi walked toward the hall's gate, discussing the upcoming episode and its potential emotional impact on the others. Naomi mentioned her improvements to the quirk erasing technology, noting how Midoriya had managed to use his quirk despite the erasure. K-19 laughed at the situation, wondering if Midoriya's ability to bypass the quirk erasing was due to gear shift, which would mean he was awakening it much earlier than his counterpart in the main continuity. Meanwhile, Midoriya and All Might were in the same place as before, continuing their conversation. Midoriya questioned whether he was the right choice to inherit One for All, feeling ashamed about his limitations. All Might urged him to stop doubting himself and encouraged him to focus on his progress. Midoriya reflected on his journey, realizing how far he had come without breaking his bones. Feeling grateful, he thanked All Might, who offered to listen to any other concerns Midoriya had. Midoriya hesitated but eventually shared his worries about his other self, who bore the burden of Sukuna. He expressed concern for that Midoriya's well-being, fearing that Sukuna's influence could lead to harm and devastation. All Might acknowledged the gravity of the situation, agreeing that the other Midoriya faced constant danger. He reminded Midoriya that they must hold on to hope and keep moving forward, despite the darkness surrounding them. Midoriya nodded, feeling both stressed and hopeful. As they prepared to return to the hall, Midoriya noticed the time and was about to push the button when All Might stopped him. He had something important to say, an apology for his previous words about Midoriya's potential without a quirk. Midoriya was taken aback by this unexpected apology, but All Might insisted he understood the weight of his earlier comments and wanted to clarify his support for Midoriya's strength, even in the face of adversity. You compared yourself to him, didn't you? Even before gaining curse energy, he was strong while you were not when you didn't have a quirk. Midoriya hesitated at first, but realizing there was no use, he finally looked down. This reaction confirmed All Might's prediction. The things he had gone through for not having a quirk, the hardship, the pain, the bullying, and all the loneliness, yet despite all of that, he never backed down and remained hopeful. If that wasn't strength, then what was? Midoriya listened to this with amazement on his face. Suddenly, All Might embraced Midoriya, taking him by surprise. At first, Midoriya blushed in embarrassment, but soon a single tear slipped from his eye when All Might said that even a person without a quirk could become a hero. Midoriya then returned the hug, expressing his gratitude. K-19 and Naomi were waiting in front of the gates. The break was over, and K-19 announced that it was time to continue the story. As everyone arrived, he clapped his hands together, signaling the next part. Shigaraki impatiently urged everyone to go inside the hall, eager to see the pointy-haired boy's demise. Toga expressed her excitement at the thought of bloodshed. K-19 smirked, teasing that he couldn't spoil anything. Monoma chimed in, expressing his eagerness to see the villains' disappointed faces, which made both Toga and Shigaraki scowl. K-19 decided it was time to move on and instructed everyone to follow him into the hall. Monoma, looking over at K-19, asked if he could change his seat. K-19 readily agreed, prompting Monoma to grin mischievously at Kendo and Vlad King, who gritted their teeth in frustration. Shinso, upon being called, got up to sit between Vlad King and Itsuka, as Monoma wished to exchange his seat. Seeing this, Vlad King and Kendo, who had been scoffing earlier, began to snicker, leaving Monoma confused. Naomi chuckled at K-19, noting how he had cleverly maneuvered Monoma away from Kendo's karate chops and into Recovery Girl's vicinity instead. All Might observed Monoma and murmured that the boy didn't even realize whom he was sitting with. Recovery Girl would be far worse than Kendo's karate chops. With everyone present, it was time to continue the story. The scene shifted to the reactions again, with K-19 expressing gratitude for the overwhelming support the story received. He reminded everyone that the release dates he provided were simply deadlines for chapter uploads. As the story resumed, Naomi took the lead. The good guys hoped everything would turn out okay, while the villains eagerly anticipated the downfall of the pointy-haired kid. Outside, rain fell as Fushiguro stood before the detention center, his attention focused on the gate. Suddenly, the screen flickered, startling everyone in the theater. Fushiguro felt alarmed, realizing that the innate domain was gone and the special grade was dead. Now, they just needed Itadori to return safely. Aizawa pointed out that this must have been right after Sukuna had killed the cursed womb. Fushiguro continued to gaze toward the center, his eyes widening in shock as he processed what was happening. Kamakiri shouted in confusion, and the audience wore expressions of disbelief. Shigaraki and Toga exchanged small smiles, while Fushiguro stood frozen with a pale face. Sukuna emerged behind him, casually stating that Itadori was not coming back. The audience gasped, many cursing and reacting with disbelief. Efo chuckled, hinting that the disaster was just beginning, while Toga liked her lips in anticipation and Dabi smiled wickedly. Midoriya watched the screen in horror, and Fushiguro's frightened expression caught Sukuna's attention. Sukuna, sensing his fear, told him to relax, claiming he was in a great mood. Shigaraki yelled at the screen, urging Sukuna to take action against Fushiguro, whose life was still in danger. Sukuna, however, decided to take a moment to speak, which brought a slight sense of relief to many viewers. As he turned and walked ahead of Fushiguro, he remarked on the consequences of trying to use him without a pact. The mention of a pact raised eyebrows among the audience. Sukuna glanced back at Fushiguro, noting his struggle to regain control. He ripped his shirt off and tossed the shredded fabric aside. Fushiguro looked on in confusion as Sukuna continued, raising one hand toward his chest. Fushiguro's eyes widened in realization, and a sense of dread filled the air. Kaminari, sweating, wondered what Sukuna was planning. In a shocking turn, Sukuna plunged his arm into his own body, causing Fushiguro to flinch in terror. Gasps filled the theater as the audience processed the unexpected act. Fear gripped many, leaving them pale and breathless, while even the villains were taken aback by Sukuna's unpredictable move. After the act, Sukuna smiled as blood trickled from his mouth, eliciting a delighted reaction from Toga. The screen displayed Sukuna's hand grasping his own heart, and Fushiguro stuttered in disbelief. Blood dripped to the ground, intensifying the horror among the onlookers. Toga drooled in excitement, while Shigaraki clapped in amusement. Spinner gritted his teeth, and Dabi seemed to relish the scene. Most of the audience, except for All for One, watched in horror as the events unfolded. Sukuna then pulled his heart from his chest, leaving Fushiguro wide-eyed. Holding the heart triumphantly, Sukuna declared his intention to take Fushiguro hostage. Midoriya's face drained of color, his body trembling in fear. Tears welled in Uraraka's eyes, while Mineta and Kaminari stood frozen in shock. All Might's expression reflected horror, and Lita's mouth quivered. The pro-heroes were speechless. their eyes wide with disbelief. Todoroki, Bokugo, Tokoyami, Kirishima, Tetsu, Kamakiri, and Shinso narrowed their eyes in anger. Aizawa's eyes glowed red, not from his quirk but from fury, as everything around him seemed to take on a crimson hue. Midnight covered her mouth in disbelief, while another character stood motionless, her eyes vacant as if she had lost consciousness. Miruko, noticing Midoriya's fear, held his hand, and Fat Gum placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The rest of Class 1B and the remaining members of Class 1A were equally horrified, their faces reflecting a deep anger directed at Sukuna. Monoma remained silent, seemingly unfazed. Present Mike was at a loss for words, unable to comprehend Sukuna's actions. Nizu gritted his teeth, while David and Melissa hung their heads low. MS Joke struggled to find words of comfort, unable to use her quirk in this situation. The scene shifted to a mountain of skulls, where Midoriya stood. All Might greeted him with a grin, relieved to see him alive. Monoma expressed his irritation, revealing that he had known something was amiss but had kept it to himself. K-19 explained that the experience was meant to evoke genuine feelings and reactions. Shigaraki, unimpressed, urged them to continue the story. Midoriya took a battle-ready stance, determined to confront Sukuna. Bakugo appreciated Midoriya's confident retort, prompting Midoriya to jot it down in his notebook. Kirishima laughed, noting Bakugo's approval of Midoriya's line. Midnight's tension dissipated, and she returned to her usual self, expressing excitement over the dialogue. Aizawa and Present Mike shared a smile, relieved to see her back to normal. The screen displayed a gruesome interior, with a large rib cage and red water, likely blood. Tiger commented on the unsettling sight, and Cementos agreed, acknowledging the grim reality of the situation. Sukuna, with a laid-back demeanor, remarked on Midoriya's fierce determination, to which Midoriya responded with unwavering resolve. Midoriya expressed his frustration, veins appearing on his forehead, as he confronted Sukuna about the situation. He felt betrayed, stating that after Sukuna had fixed his arm, he had taken something vital from him. Todoroki admired Midoriya's straightforwardness, appreciating his direct approach. Uraraka chimed in, teasing Bakugo, suggesting that if Midoriya had been more assertive, he would have put Bakugo in his place. Bakugo shot a glare at her, showing his annoyance. Midoriya sighed, feeling overwhelmed by the tension. He surveyed the surroundings, questioning if this was hell, and expressed his reluctance to be stuck with them even in death. Picking up a skull from the ground, he declared his intent to retaliate and threw it towards Sukuna, hitting the mountain of skulls where Sukuna was perched, causing a significant disturbance. Kirishima cheered for Midoriya's boldness, while Sukuna effortlessly dodged the chaos, landing atop a ribcage with a confident stance. The audience reacted with groans as Midoriya charged at Sukuna, roaring his challenge. He threw a punch, which Sukuna blocked, followed by another that met the same fate. Undeterred, Midoriya continued his assault, throwing punches that Sukuna skillfully avoided. Endeavor sighed, noting the repeated failures, but Hawks encouraged him to stay positive. Arihiro remarked that he would only be satisfied if Midoriya managed to land a hit on Sukuna. Midoriya, fueled by frustration, swung for an uppercut, but Sukuna evaded again. In a moment of anger, Midoriya aimed a powerful punch at Sukuna, but instead, he redirected his force downward, striking the ribcage beneath them. The impact caused Sukuna to lose his balance momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Midoriya spun and delivered a swift kick to Sukuna's face, catching him off guard. Tiger commented on the brilliance of Midoriya's tactical maneuver, while Edgeshot praised his strategy. Midoriya blushed at the compliments, feeling a surge of confidence. However, his triumph was short-lived as he realized Sukuna had vanished, only to reappear behind him, eliciting groans from the audience. FO laughed, noting that Sukuna was too quick to fall for Midoriya's tactics. Midoriya gasped in surprise as Sukuna scoffed, dismissing him as boring. With a swift kick, Sukuna sent Midoriya tumbling into the red water below, prompting laughter from Shigaraki and Toga while Midoriya hid his face in embarrassment. Monoma, unable to contain himself, laughed uncontrollably, only to be silenced by Recovery Girl's swift reprimand. Midoriya managed to rise to his knees, lamenting that he thought he had executed his plan perfectly. Before he could fully recover, Sukuna landed on his back, forcing him down again. Frustrated, Midoriya yelled as he struggled beneath Sukuna's weight, but the audience erupted in laughter at the scene. Sukuna revealed that they were not in the afterlife but rather in his innate domain. Midoriya recognized it as the concept Fushiguro had mentioned. Momo pointed out the differences, and K-19 explained that they were in a domain expansion. Sukuna confirmed that they were still alive and offered to fix Midoriya's heart if he accepted his conditions. Hesitant, Midoriya expressed his reluctance to return to life under Sukuna's terms, preferring to remain dead than accept a deal with him. He accused Sukuna of being a cocky villain, to which Kaminari praised Midoriya's boldness. Sukuna declared that the game had changed, and an image of Fushiguro appeared on the screen, causing concern among the audience. Gran Torino expressed his anger at Sukuna's intentions, while Vlad King worried about the implications of his plan. Melissa speculated that Sukuna might want to steal Fushiguro's abilities, and Aizawa acknowledged that it was a possibility. Nizu pondered Sukuna's true motives, while Lita expressed his desire for Midoriya to return without endangering others. Ryukyu voiced her concern that Midoriya was unaware of Sukuna's interest in Fushiguro, fearing he might accept the deal without understanding the risks. Midoriya urged his other self not to agree. Sukuna presented two conditions. He would take control of Midoriya's body for 1 minute when he said, "Enchant," and Midoriya would forget about the agreement. Spinner shouted for Midoriya not to accept, pointing out that he would gain nothing in return. Dabi challenged Spinner's hypocrisy, and Shuji glared at him, causing him to flinch. Midoriya firmly rejected Sukuna's proposal, declaring that he understood the villain's true nature. "I won't ever let you take over my body again," Midoriya declared firmly. The others wanted to cheer for him, but deep down, they still hoped for his revival despite the danger. Sukuna surprised everyone by announcing that he wouldn't kill or hurt anyone during that minute. Tetsu questioned why Sukuna wanted to take over Midoriya's body if he wouldn't be able to harm anyone. Kendo scoffed, suggesting that Sukuna was simply lying. Midoriya shouted back, expressing his disbelief. Miruko supported Midoriya, urging him not to trust Sukuna. Sukuna found their reactions annoying, stating that it didn't matter if they believed him, this was a pact. Kamui Woods noted that Sukuna had mentioned the pact again, while MT Lady cried out for clarification on its importance. Midnight taunted her, suggesting that if she remained quiet, she might learn more. Their banter continued, but 13 intervened, scolding them both. Sukuna explained that a pact was a binding vow, showing an image of himself entangled in chains. He revealed that he would be punished if he broke it, and the chains tightened around him, suggesting a severe consequence. The audience became intrigued by this revelation. David Shield clarified that a pact required a trade-off. To gain something, one must give something in return, and breaking the rules would lead to punishment. Shishida questioned why Sukuna would want to possess Midoriya's body if he couldn't harm anyone. Power Loader speculated that Sukuna likely had a plan that didn't involve violence. Sukuna reminded them that there were consequences for greed, and a flashback of his fight against the cursed womb played on the screen. Midoriya challenged him, recalling how Sukuna had switched bodies easily before. Sukuna acknowledged that back then he had wanted to switch too, but Midoriya had been following the sorcerer's orders. The audience nodded in understanding as Sukuna explained that a pact was based on mutual interest, a key factor in the world of Jujutsu. Kaibara suggested that Midoriya should accept Sukuna's terms, viewing it as a win-win situation. Midoriya agreed to the pact, stating that he would accept Sukuna's conditions. Shigaraki scoffed, dismissing it as a meaningless death. All Might felt relieved that Midoriya was back, but he remained skeptical of Sukuna's intentions. Sukuna released his hold on Midoriya, who stood up and exhaled, expressing his determination to be revived. Sukuna smirked at Midoriya, but before he could react further, Midoriya's fist connected with his face, causing blood to spill and sending him staggering back. The punch propelled Sukuna at least 15 feet away, prompting cheers from Ojiro and expressions of admiration from Kirishima and Tetsu. Bakugo shouted his approval, while Tokage found satisfaction in Sukuna's injury. Pixie Bob gazed at Midoriya with admiration, envisioning a future together. Ibra watched with a bored expression, while the villains displayed disappointment. Sukuna wiped the blood from his mouth, insisting that he wouldn't agree to the pact without conditions, blaming Midoriya for his death. Pony praised Midoriya's spirit, and the pro-heroes showered him with encouragement. Midnight playfully mentioned that she would kiss him if she were there, causing Midoriya to blush. Ibra sighed, praying for forgiveness for their behavior. Sukuna proposed a fight to the death. If Midoriya won, he would be revived without conditions, but if Sukuna won, Midoriya would return under his terms. Kaminari shouted for Midoriya not to accept, and tension filled the air as everyone awaited his response. Midoriya confidently agreed, raising his head high. The villains laughed, their expressions twisted into sinister smiles, while Mineta cried out in horror. Bakugo angrily chastised Midoriya for his foolishness, and Awase hit his head in frustration. Midoriya's eyes reflected his disappointment at the chaos around him. Jiro shook her head, noting that even her classmates wouldn't make such a reckless decision. Gran Torino and All Might exchanged glances, speechless. Midoriya began to declare his intent, but before he could finish, he was abruptly silenced, his face disappearing in an instant. The audience gasped in shock, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. Koda remarked on the swift nature of Sukuna's attack, while Aizawa expressed fear over Sukuna's true danger. The villains snapped out of their shock, and Todoroki noted that Midoriya would need to wake up before Dr. Yeri could dissect his body. The scene shifted back to the morgue, where Gojo's voice echoed, acknowledging his own flaws. Etshot, Aizawa, Endeavor, and Vlad King scoffed at his self-awareness, while Mina defended him. Ijichi's comment prompted laughter from the audience. Inside the room, Gojo warned Ijichi about a painful forehead flick coming his way. Ijichi stuttered in confusion, and ectoplasm confirmed the severity of Gojo's flick. Gojo explained that he had a dream that motivated him to teach at the school, and when Ijichi asked about it, Gojo humorously referenced a character from another story, causing everyone to laugh again. Joke applauds him. Amajiki nudges Mirio, remarking on how well he cracked a joke. Mirio responds with a deadpan expression. Gojo elaborates on the state of the jujutsu world. He explains that, as demonstrated by Yuji's case, the upper echelons of the jujutsu community are filled with unsavory characters, conservative fools, arrogant individuals, and those who are simply misguided. He expresses his desire to reset this flawed world, acknowledging that while eliminating the leaders would be easy, it wouldn't lead to true change, as someone else would merely take their place. He believes that such actions wouldn't inspire a revolution, and that people generally do not support massacres. If he were to act on those thoughts, he would find himself without followers. Silence envelopes the hall as Gojo's words resonate with both heroes and villains alike. His message forces them to reflect on their ideals and their lives. For the villains, like Toga, Spinner, and Twice, their thoughts are filled with conflict. Toga blinks repeatedly, contemplating her choices. She reflects on her decision to join the League of Villains, hoping to create a world where everyone can live freely without fear of punishment. Yet, Gojo's words suggest that despite her efforts, nothing will change. Spinner remains expressionless, grappling with his own doubts. He recalls his reasons for joining the League, believing he could bring about societal change by eliminating heroes. However, he wonders if Gojo is right. What if his actions lead to nothing? He considers the possibility of trusting the next generation, realizing he needs to think more deeply before making any decisions. Twice begins to question the League itself. He recognizes that their intentions align somewhat with Gojo's, yet Gojo believes that eliminating those in power, akin to heroes, will yield no positive outcome. He starts to doubt whether joining the League was the right choice. Dabi, on the other hand, remains focused solely on revenge and feels little concern for Twice, although he notices Twice's troubled demeanor and wonders if it relates to Gojo's statements. Shigaraki is troubled, unable to believe he is questioning All for One. Gojo's words have sown seeds of doubt in his mind, and he replays AFO's lessons, trying to convince himself that Gojo is wrong. He scratches his neck anxiously, torn between loyalty to his master and the unsettling thoughts that have taken root. Kurogi watches Shigaraki with concern. All for one senses the shift in the atmosphere and feels a wave of anxiety. He realizes that Gojo is influencing their thoughts, potentially altering their perspectives. If Gojo succeeds, it could spell trouble for him. He resolves to divert their attention during the next break. Though AFO maintains a stoic exterior, Mr. Compress can sense his unease and quickly deduces the source of his worry. He shakes his head and turns back to the screen, just as Tsukachi glances at him, sharing a knowing look. Mr. Compress's eyes widen as he understands the detective's implication. He realizes that simply removing the current members of the HPSC won't suffice. A fundamental change is necessary. Hawks smiles at this revelation, grateful to Gojo for helping him see the bigger picture. Nizu exchanges a glance with Hawks, nodding in agreement with the number 2 hero's insight. Aizawa voices his agreement with Gojo, stating that killing those in power would not lead to positive outcomes. He emphasizes that violence cannot achieve meaningful change. Vault King concurs, looking at the villains, who nervously avert their gazes. Mina interjects, asserting that they have judged Gojo too harshly and that he is not the person they believed him to be. Midnight praises Gojo for his maturity and responsibility, while Edgeshot acknowledges their previous misjudgment. Ryukyu adds that instead of resorting to violence against the higher-ups, Gojo seeks to create change through different means, highlighting his honorable and determined motivation. The pro-heroes present nod in agreement, as do the students and others in attendance. Bakugo feels unsettled, berating himself for lacking a noble motivation for wanting to become a hero, aside from not wanting to be left behind by Deku and his desire to be number 1. Meanwhile, Lita finds himself at a loss for how to process everything being discussed. Gojo explains that he is turning to education to cultivate strong and intelligent allies. As he speaks, images of all the Jujutsu Tech students appear on the screen, showcasing Maki, Panda, Inumaki, Fushiguro, Nobara, and Midoria. All Might beams with pride, recalling his own decision to focus on education to guide the youth toward greatness and inspire them to become heroes who fight for the innocent rather than for personal gain. Gran Torino notes that Gojo's choice to become a teacher allows him to mentor his students, ensuring that the next generation can help him achieve his goals. Endeavor agrees, recognizing that this approach could reform the jujitsu world from the ground up through education. Gojo adds that he occasionally assigns missions to his students as a form of tough love, which elicits laughter from those in the hall. Ijichi playfully retorts, questioning whether Gojo simply wants to avoid work, prompting more laughter. Gojo's statement about his students reveals his deep care for them, bringing smiles to the audience. He highlights the potential of third-year Hikari and second-year Okatsu, noting that they could become jujitsu sorcerers on par with him. Aizawa points out that Hikari is one of the students who got suspended, while Midoriya acknowledges that Yuta and Hikari appear to be the strongest students. K-19 confirms their strength, drawing everyone's attention. They were not only the strongest students but also ranked second and third to Gojo overall. Everyone wore expressions of surprise and awe. Beast Genist remarked that it was no wonder Gojo believed them to have potential to reach his level. Kirishima suggested that Yuta and Hikari were like Bakugo and Todoroki, respectively. Tetsu smiled widely, expressing his approval of Kirishima's choice. Bakugo and Todoroki exchanged glances, acknowledging that it would be interesting if that prediction came true. Meanwhile, Monoma scowled, confidently stating that one of them would definitely be him. Gojo clenched his fists tightly, lamenting that Izuku could have been one of them. The audience gazed at the screen in amazement, with Midoriya displaying a look of astonishment. David Shield commented that he was not surprised at all. All Might, Gran Torino, Recovery Girl, Nizu, and Tsukachi smiled in agreement. Uraraka exclaimed that of course Midoriya was amazing in both worlds. Tokage smiled warmly, unable to deny it. Midoriya blushed at the compliments, while Bakugo scoffed but then smirked, acknowledging that it was expected of the nerd. All for One observed everything with a sideways glance, contemplating that Shigaraki would definitely face trouble from Midoriya in the future, and he would need to dispose of him when the time was right. Shoko, wearing gloves, announced that she was about to get started. Mineta yelled for Midoriya to get up faster, warning him that she was going to cut him. Bakugo shouted for Deku to get moving, while Shoko asked if he was just going to sit there and watch. Just then, Izuku got up and sat behind her. Pixie Bob laughed, pointing her finger at the scene. Gojo looked on in surprise, while Ijichi appeared flabbergasted. The audience erupted in laughter at Ijichi's expression. Shoko wondered why they were reacting this way and turned to look behind her. Her eyes widened in shock upon seeing Midoriya sitting there. He looked down at himself, realizing he was completely naked. His face turned bright red with embarrassment, steam practically rising from it as he hid his face. Uraraka laughed but then blushed when she imagined Midoriya naked, which only made everyone laugh harder, reveling in his discomfort. Gojo laughed, holding his head in amusement, while Ijichi became so flustered that he started stuttering, exclaiming that Midoriya was alive. Gojo told Ijichi to be quiet, while Jiro pointed out that they would have reacted the same way if they hadn't seen Sukuna's proposition earlier. Shoko expressed her disappointment, wishing for a different outcome. Midoriya, feeling embarrassed, asked who Shoko was, aware of his nakedness in front of her. Hagakure laughed, saying that if their Midoriya were in this situation, he would have died of embarrassment already. Siro nodded but shot a look at Midoriya, who sighed and defended himself, stating that Kami's NDTY was due to her ability, not because of him. He then noticed Kaminari giving him a similar look, while Mineta did not. Gojo stood up, welcoming Midoriya back. Midoriya raised his hand, responding that it was good to be back. The teacher and student exchanged high fives, while Shoko brought clothes for Midoriya. As Gojo and Shoko walked out of the building, Shoko sighed, saying she would have to revise the reports. Gojo stopped her, insisting that they should leave them as they were. Kinoko questioned this, and Gojo explained that he needed time to give Midoriya the basic training necessary before he was targeted again. 13 agreed, stating that Midoriya needed training to use cursed energy properly. Mandalay interjected, suggesting that Midoriya should at least inform Fushiguro and Uraraka that he was alive. Aizawa disagreed, stating it was best to keep it a secret to prevent any accidental leaks that could lead to Midoriya being attacked again. Shoko asked Gojo why, and he explained that nothing should keep Midoriya from living the best years of his life. Midnight voiced her agreement, expressing concern that the challenges he faced were too harsh for someone his age. Death Arm leaned toward Kamui Woods and whispered that he didn't understand how Midnight could switch from speaking harshly to sounding like a worried mother. Kamui Woods simply shook his head, suggesting that if they didn't put effort into this, it would be better. Midoriya was shown wearing a blue sleeveless t-shirt while Ijichi examined him from afar. He smiled, imagining the surprise and happiness on his classmates' faces. Gojo and Shoko finally exited the building, with Gojo stating that it wasn't just Midoriya who would surprise everyone. Aizawa thought to himself that while Gojo might not be the best teacher, he excelled in these matters. Suddenly, a flying bot head appeared, drawing everyone's attention. Rin was the first to notice it, and soon everyone was looking up, mumbling to one another. The bot introduced itself as GLD, explaining its role in informing them about counterparts. It mentioned that many of them would appear as different characters with different names, voices, and faces before disappearing. Momo commented that it was something else. The scene shifted to a restaurant where waiters were passing by and customers were ordering. A character with stitches sat at a table, and across from him were 3 shadows of curses. Kinoko questioned why there were 3 shadows instead of the 3 curses, and Naomi explained that it was shown from a non-sorcerer's perspective who could sense curses but not see them. Kinoko nodded in understanding. The screen zoomed out to reveal a familiar face as a waiter, who was sweating profusely with terror in his eyes. The audience gasped in shock, recognizing him as Hawks. Miruko exclaimed that he was indeed a waiter. Hawks rubbed the back of his head, acknowledging that he was also a side character. Dabi laughed, teasing him about being the number 2 hero as a waiter. Shigaraki joined in, mocking him for being an NPC. Hawks ignored their comments, diverting his gaze but groaning when he caught Miruko's teasing glance and Edge Shot's mischievous smile. Endeavor maintained a stoic expression, But internally he was savoring the moment, unaware of the impending event that would shake him to his core. Hawks's counterpart was sweating profusely, terror evident in his eyes as panic surged through his mind, deciding that he would abandon his work immediately. Spinner scoffed at the cowardice displayed, mocking the decision to flee out of fear. The waiter, increasingly anxious, expressed his sense of responsibility, sharing that he had been saving his earnings to support his 4 younger sisters' college education. Mineta chuckled, noting the large family and the active role their parents seemed to play in this world. However, he quickly shivered as he sensed a dark aura emanating from Hawks, who was consumed by memories of his mother, the same woman who had sold him for money, and his abusive father. The waiter, feeling overwhelmed, resolved not to approach the table, fearing for his life. Mirio attempted to lighten the mood with a joke about the smartest anime side characters, but it fell flat, met only with silence. Meanwhile, discussions among the villains turned serious as they contemplated the possibility of defeating Gojo Satoru, with one suggesting that sealing him might be a safer alternative than attempting to kill him. As the conversation continued, Kurojiri mentioned that if they had the sealing ability, they could have dealt with All Might long ago. The mention of the special-grade cursed object, Prison Realm, piqued everyone's interest, and they collectively expressed their surprise. The volcano curse, amused, noted the potential danger of his own erupting head, causing concern among the others. The head waiter informed a female colleague that Table 5 had not placed an order, urging someone to check on the patron occupying the table alone. Just then, Hawks's counterpart dashed towards the head waiter, declaring his resignation before fleeing the restaurant in a panic. This comedic scene elicited laughter from both heroes and villains alike, including Melissa and David, while Hawks felt embarrassed, especially as Mirko's laughter rang out. The volcano curse reveled in the chaos, his head erupting with excitement. The heroes breathed a sigh of relief when they realized the eruption caused no real damage, though many villains expressed disappointment. As the head waiter approached to take their order, a sudden and shocking event occurred. His body ignited in flames, leaving everyone in the hall in stunned silence. The sight ignited a fierce rage within the heroes and students, while David and Melissa watched in horror. Nearby, a female waiter gasped in shock, dropping her plate as she witnessed the head waiter's fate. Panic ensued as customers screamed in terror, and the villains, including AFO, Toga, Dabi, and Shigaraki, took pleasure in the chaos unfolding around them. The Stitches guy cautioned the volcano curse to keep the commotion to a minimum, but Jogo dismissed the concern, smiling as he raised his fingers, igniting more customers in flames. The pro-heroes clenched their fists, helplessly watching innocent lives being lost. A student nearby gasped in disbelief, only to witness another student catch fire, prompting her to flee in desperation, but it was too late. The horror of the scene left the remaining students in shock, their bodies trembling with fear and anger. The female waiter stood frozen, unable to move as chaos erupted around her. She was drenched in sweat, her heart racing, while the customers and fellow waiters fell victim to the flames. The Stitches guy coughed from the smoke, making a dark joke about the restaurant choice, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone present. All Might instinctively bulked up, while Endeavor's expression twisted with rage, longing to confront Jogo directly. The rest of the pro-heroes shared his sentiment, ready to take action. Midoriya trembled with fury, electricity crackling around him, though the quirk suppression device held it in check. K-19 and Naomi exchanged glances, sensing that Midoriya was on the verge of unlocking his gear shift ability. Bakugo's eyes blazed with intensity, his desire for vengeance against Jogo palpable. The UA students could no longer bear the horrific scene and turned away, unable to watch. The female waiter, now the last survivor, crawled toward the exit, her breath quickening, heart pounding loudly enough for others to hear. Spinner felt a surge of rage, witnessing the senseless destruction of innocent lives, while Mr. Compress lowered his hat, reflecting the gravity of the situation. While the other villains were enjoying themselves, Shigaraki laughed in delight, expressing that it was his favorite moment from the story yet. Meanwhile, All for One smirked, reassuring himself that he had no reason to worry. Even though Gojo's words had an impact on their emotions, the hatred and madness within them remained stronger. As long as that was the case, they wouldn't change. The two cursed spirits observed the chaos around them. Jogo asked Geto, whose name had just been revealed, how strong he was in terms of Sukuna's fingers. Geto, being generous, estimated that Jogo was about 8 or 9 fingers strong. Many eyes widened at that revelation. Jogo, filled with excitement, demanded the prison realm, eager for the power it would bring. A waitress, crawling and sliding across the floor with tears in her eyes, was about to reach the door. The audience followed Ibra, praying for her escape. They urged her to hurry and get out. Jogo, with a sinister grin, declared that he would add the prison realm to his collection, and in return, he would eliminate Gojo Satoru. As the waitress reached the automatic door, it opened, but in the next moment, she was engulfed in flames, her struggles evident on screen. The door closed and the screen went black. All for one taunted the heroes, claiming that the people were burned to a crisp. Toga and Twice giggled together, while Dabi mocked the situation, remarking on the effectiveness of fire. Angry growls filled the hall as Uraraka expressed her disbelief at the cruelty displayed. Kamakiri gasped, noting that the victims had been killed for no reason. Miruko, furious, vowed to make the perpetrator pay if she ever got the chance. Mandalay gritted her teeth, lamenting the loss of innocent lives for mere amusement. Melissa whispered in trauma about the senselessness of it all, while David hugged his daughter to comfort her. May remained silent, struggling to hold back tears. All Might, fists clenched, looked down in despair, wishing he could jump into the screen to save the civilians. Lida, with a cold expression, stared at the screen, while Midoriya took a deep breath, feeling his heart race. Shinso's eyes darkened with a murderous glee, and Endeavor fumed with rage, wishing he could confront the villain responsible. The flying AI bot, G.I.L.G, reappeared before the audience, drawing their attention. Jiro recognized it, and Aizawa pointed out that Jogo was a counterpart from their world. Everyone glared at Dabi with vengeful eyes, including civilians like Melissa, David, and Detective Tsukachi. Endeavor's glare seemed to bore into Dabi, who smirked back defiantly. Toga cheered in delight at the revelation of a counterpart, while Kurogiri congratulated Dabi, and Mr. Compress patted his back. The bot announced Jogo's details, revealing him to be a special-grade cursed spirit. Dabi's mouth fell open upon hearing his real name, and Endeavor's eyes widened in horror as he realized the implications. All Might connected the dots, realizing that Jogo was actually Endeavor's deceased son. Midoriya confirmed this, and Mina asked if Tuya was related to Todoroki. Shoto revealed that Tuya was his oldest brother, shocking his peers. Mina expressed her curiosity about why he had never mentioned it before, while Bakugo pointed out the obvious sadness on Shoto's face. The audience gasped at the revelation, and Mina quickly apologized to Shoto. He shrugged it off, indicating that no apology was necessary. The heroes and teachers turned their gaze to Endeavor, who was now looking defeated, a stark contrast to his usual confident demeanor. The mood in the hall grew somber, and all for one grinned, hinting that another shock awaited Endeavor when he learned that his son was still alive and present in the room as a villain. Meanwhile, Dabi scoffed at Endeavor's reaction, accusing him of pretending to care. Naomi continued the story without comment. An apartment was shown, belonging to Mandalay's counterpart, the mother of Tadashi. Ragdoll pointed out the connection, and Fushiguro explained that by the time they arrived, Tadashi was already dead. He admitted skepticism about saving anyone, but his friend had been different. The audience smiled, recalling Midoriya's repeated efforts to save others. Fushiguro shared how he had tried to bring Tadashi's body back after confirming his death. In a flashback, he was seen tearing the nameplate from Tadashi's uniform before running out. He handed it to Mandalay, bowing in apology as he did so. "I'm sorry we weren't able to save Tadashi," she said, falling to her knees and beginning to cry. "I am the only one who will mourn his passing anyway." They felt sympathy for her but were unsure how to comfort her. Mandalay managed a small, sad smile. She expressed her trust in her other self, believing that, although it would take time, everything would turn out okay in the end. Despite the ongoing events, Endeavor remained lost in thought, haunted by Tuya's words echoing in his mind. Nizu turned to Endeavor with a frown, noting that he would be the first to have a long discussion. He then glanced at K-19 and Naomi, acknowledging the lesson they were learning from the unfolding story. The scene shifted back to Tokyo Jujutsu High. Nobara screamed as she sprinted forward, with Panda chasing her, a wide smile on his face. Bakugo laughed at Uraraka's counterparts' antics, much to Uraraka's annoyance. "Look at her running like a fool," he remarked. Inumaki sat on the ground while Maki stood beside him, both dressed in tracksuits. Hearing footsteps, the two upperclassmen turned to see Fushiguro descending the stairs, zipping up his tracksuit. "You're late, Megumi," Maki said. Inumaki simply responded with a word. "What were you doing?" Maki inquired, to which he replied, "What does it matter?" After a moment of contemplation, Fushiguro looked at Maki and asked, "What kinds of people do you want to save as a jujutsu sorcerer?" Maki shrugged, expressing her indifference towards the idea of saving anyone. Fushiguro, appearing bored, thought he shouldn't have asked. Kaminari chuckled at their straightforwardness, commenting on how blunt they were. Nobara then shouted at Fushiguro to stop asking interview questions and to switch with her, expressing her frustration with the school uniforms and her desire for cute tracksuits. In the next moment, the camera zoomed out to reveal Panda spinning and swinging Nobara around by her legs. "Here we go," he said, releasing her, and she went flying through the air, landing on the ground with a scream. Uraraka face-bombed, hiding her face in embarrassment, while the audience laughed, including Monoma, who mocked Uraraka as he usually did. Deku couldn't help but snicker, thinking how cute she was. "What are those two doing?" Fushiguro asked. Panda replied, "Falling practice." Maki then twirled a stick in her hand, pointing it at Fushiguro and signaling him to come closer. "Land a blow on us." Edgeshot explained that the stick was a metal polearm, confirming Momo's earlier thoughts. She expressed her interest in joining Edgeshot's agency, which made Kendo groan at the reminder of her own agency choice. Momo smiled, feeling flattered by Edgeshot's offer. The scene shifted again, with Gojo standing in front of Midoriya in a house, praising his combat skills. Sato and others agreed, acknowledging Midoriya's prowess in physical combat. Gojo explained that Midoriya needed to learn how to control cursed energy and the basics of jujutsu. Midoriya, beaming with determination, expressed his desire to become strong and asked Gojo to teach him how to be the strongest. Gojo smiled at Midoriya's enthusiasm, noting his keen eye. Midoriya playfully pointed out that Gojo had declared himself the strongest. Gojo then directed their attention to some cans on the desk, explaining their purpose. He demonstrated the difference between cursed energy and cursed techniques using the cans, illustrating his point with clarity. The audience chuckled at Midoriya's embarrassment when K-19 interrupted, suggesting that Gojo would explain things himself. Gojo compared cursed energy to electricity and cursed techniques to appliances, emphasizing the importance of understanding both for effective use. He pointed to the green can, indicating he had just fired off pure cursed energy, and then gestured to the orange can. Midoriya focused intently, channeling cursed energy into a technique to twist the can. Hound Dog turned to him, seeking confirmation of his understanding. Midoriya nodded, explaining that it was similar to how his quirk operated during full cowling, allowing him to use his abilities without injuring himself. Grand Torino regarded Midoriya with a skeptical expression, noting how long it had taken him to grasp this concept about himself. Midoriya shyly rubbed the back of his head. Gran Torino then directed his gaze at All Might, suggesting that if he had been a better teacher, Midoriya wouldn't have faced so many injuries. All Might, feeling embarrassed, looked away and began whistling. Midoriya's excitement bubbled over as he wondered if he would learn an impressive cursed technique. Shota chimed in, pointing out that this was the only thing Midoriya had grasped from the discussion. Recovery Girl interrupted, scolding Monoma for his comment about Class 1A students. Monoma yelped in pain as she tapped him on the head with her cane, causing him to slump back into his seat. Zuzo remarked on Monoma's relentless behavior, while Manga's speech bubble confirmed his sentiment. Gojo then delivered the disappointing news to Midoriya that he couldn't use cursed techniques, shattering his hopes. Midoriya could only manage a stunned response. The audience gasped collectively at the revelation. Gojo elaborated that cursed techniques were deeply ingrained in a person from birth, with innate talent accounting for a significant portion of the ability to use them. Momo added that cursed techniques provided unique abilities, but Midoriya had never been able to harness his cursed energy. Shinso explained that while Midoriya had gained cursed energy after consuming Sukuna's fingers, he lacked the control needed to use it effectively. Midoriya clenched his fists in frustration, lamenting his inability to save others if he couldn't master curse techniques or fully utilize one for all without consequences. In a moment of despair, Midoriya seemed to collapse, resembling a piece of paper. Best Jeanist questioned if he had truly turned into paper, while Bakugo wiped his eyes in disbelief. K-19 clarified that he had merely used his power to illustrate how Midoriya felt after the revelation. Gojo checked on Midoriya, who expressed his disappointment at not being able to unleash powerful attacks like thunder or fire. Gojo reassured him that he could still execute a power bomb, referencing a famous Japanese wrestler known for the move. Midoriya lamented his desire to perform iconic techniques from various anime, flailing his limbs in frustration. Gojo observed Midoriya's antics with a smile, encouraging him that one day Sukuna's cursed techniques would be imprinted in his body. Shigaraki reacted in disbelief, while others speculated about the implications of Midoriya potentially using Sukuna's techniques in the future. Midoriya was astonished at the thought, while Vlad King complained about the frequent power-ups given to Class 1A students. Kendo noted that Vlad King was just as troublesome as Minoma, and Kirishima expressed confidence in Midoriya's potential. Midoriya continued to flail like a piece of paper, voicing his frustration. Gojo decided to help him regain focus, emphasizing the importance of honing his physical attacks with cursed energy. He expressed that he was more concerned about raw, powerful attacks than half-hearted cursed techniques, praising Midoriya's talent for close combat. With that encouragement, Midoriya snapped out of his paper-like state, realizing his strength was about to grow even more. Jiro commented on his remarkable potential, causing Midoriya to blush. Mineta complained about not receiving similar power-ups, prompting Azui to suggest that he might improve if he focused on better behavior. Midoriya lifted his head, recalling that he had already managed to channel cursed energy during a past battle. A flashback revealed his fists enveloped in red cursed energy as he struck a foe. Gojo smiled, encouraging Midoriya to give it another try. He gestured for Midoriya to hit his palm, teasing that he might not be able to do it. Bakugo scoffed at Gojo's challenge, while Power Loader remarked on Gojo's eccentricity. Tokoyami added his own dark commentary, setting the stage for Midoriya's next steps in mastering his abilities. Midoriya found himself in a perplexing situation, questioning why he had asked Gojo to strike him when he was clearly unwilling to do so. He warned Gojo not to blame him if he got hurt while holding his biceps tightly. Despite the warning, Midoriya urged him to hurry up and just do it. Taking a deep breath, Midoriya delivered a punch to Gojo's palm, the impact sending a gust of wind around them. All Might scratched his head in confusion, wondering what Gojo meant when he said Midoriya wouldn't be able to land a hit. Mei chimed in, agreeing with Power Loader that Gojo certainly had a screw loose. AFO observed that the red energy they had seen previously did not appear this time, pondering the reason behind it. Nizu smirked knowingly, while Gojo explained to Midoriya that the punch lacked any cursed energy. Midoriya, skeptical, asked why that was the case. Gojo elaborated that negative emotions were the source of cursed energy, suggesting that during the previous incident, Midoriya had been overwhelmed with anger and fear. Kirishima suddenly realized the implications, suggesting that Bakugo's counterpart could easily be a powerful sorcerer. Bakugo, fuming, demanded to know if Kirishima was implying he had negative emotions. Jiro bluntly confirmed Bakugo's suspicion, prompting a heated retort from him. Midoriya, deep in thought, speculated that one must constantly be on edge to utilize cursed energy, recalling how Fushiguro often seemed irritable. A humorous chibi image of an angry Fushiguro appeared, exclaiming about demon dogs, causing the audience to erupt in laughter. Gojo playfully swatted the image away. Meanwhile, at Tokyo High, Fushiguro felt a familiar annoyance creeping in, narrowing his eyes and sporting an angry tick mark on his forehead, which only fueled the laughter from the audience. Maki noticed Fushiguro's irritation and inquired about it. He reassured her that it wasn't her causing the annoyance. In the background, Panda was spinning Nobara around by her legs, her screams echoing as he tossed her into the air. Inumaki dashed in to catch her just in time, declaring, "Salmon row," which elicited more laughter, especially from Bakugo, who found Uraraka's embarrassment amusing. Hagakure comforted Uraraka with a gentle head pat, while Toga found the situation amusing, commenting on how cute Uraraka looked. Maki, focused on training, tossed a stick to Fushiguro, who caught it and remarked on how good it felt in his hands. Kurwaro expressed his desire for a similar weapon. Returning to Gojo and Midoriya, Gojo explained that everyone trained to harness cursed energy from even the faintest sparks of emotion. He illustrated this with mannequins, showing how their cursed energy shifted from blue to red when angered, and back to blue when emotions were controlled. Bando found this concept intriguing, while Kozai elaborated on how mastering emotional control allowed for effective use of cursed energy in attacks. The students and teachers were taken aback by Kozai's insight. Kinoko expressed surprise at Suburaba's intelligence, and Tetsu questioned where he had been all this time. Vault King grinned at Kozai, who felt a bit intimidated by the attention. Ibra made a sign of the cross, wishing for Kozai's peace of mind. Nizu noted the fascinating connection between emotions and abilities, likening it to wielding a double-edged sword that could exhaust or harm if not handled carefully. Aizawa suggested incorporating this knowledge into their curriculum to benefit the students. The teachers agreed, and Nizu promised to discuss it with the Minister of Education. Gojo then proposed a rather unconventional training method, which made Midoriya gulp in apprehension. He raised his hands, revealing movie covers, announcing that they would be watching movies. The collective reaction was one of disbelief, with Momo struggling to find words in response. Aizawa and several other teachers began to twitch in annoyance at Gojo's suggestion. Miruko and Bakugo voiced their frustration simultaneously, while Midoriya remained in a state of disbelief. Hound Dog, caught up in his anger, momentarily forgot his human speech. Gojo clarified that the students would not just be watching movies, they would be doing so with a peculiar doll he produced, a sleeping teddy bear. The audience was curious about the doll's origin, and Midoriya questioned its purpose. Gojo explained that it was a cursed corpse created by the principal, which intrigued Midoriya, who examined it closely. As Midoriya pulled at the doll's limbs, he expressed confusion about Gojo's intentions. Gojo urged him to be patient, assuring him that he would soon understand the purpose behind the doll. The cursed doll suddenly awakens and strikes Midoriya on the cheek, causing him to wince in pain. Gojo speaks calmly while the doll and Midoriya move in slow motion. Midoriya's head reels back as the doll tumbles to the ground, and Gojo explains that the cursed doll will attack if it doesn't receive a steady flow of energy. As Gojo finishes speaking, the doll collapses, and Midoriya steadies himself. The audience watches in awe at Gojo's speed. He not only moves quickly but also speaks rapidly. The doll immediately falls asleep, and Midoriya cradles his face in discomfort. Mirio makes a pun about dolls being Midoriya's new weakness but is met with silence. He sinks into disappointment, wondering why no one laughs. Amajiki urges Mirio to stop trying to be funny. Gojo continues, mentioning the variety of movies available, from heartwarming to thrilling, which can evoke laughter, tears, or even disgust. The teddy bear awakens again, yawning and looking at Midoriya, who is still holding his cheek and glaring at the doll. Gojo continues to explain that Midoriya's first task is to watch an entire movie without waking the doll. Sato comments on the absurdity of someone having a conflict with a doll, prompting chuckles from the audience. Mirio expresses frustration that his jokes are ignored while others receive laughter. Nijire explains that Mirio's jokes have become overused. Gojo holds up a movie cover, stating that it will help train Midoriya to control his cursed energy. Midoriya, frowning, presses his hands on the doll's head to put it to sleep. The doll screams and flails but eventually falls asleep. Midoriya sighs in relief, only for the doll to wake up again, startling him. Jiro observes that despite his clumsiness, Midoriya's innocence makes him a perfect counterpart. Midoriya blushes deeply, momentarily losing his composure until Miruko shakes him back to reality. Gojo sets up the CD player, explaining that it is calibrated to the faint level of energy Midoriya can produce, but it will require more energy over time. As Midoriya struggles to keep the doll asleep, he finally admits defeat, expressing his frustration. Gojo suggests starting with a specific movie, pointing out that the heroine is annoying but meets a spectacular end. Midoriya groans about the spoilers, while Koda is baffled by Gojo's tendency to ruin movies. MS Joke comments that Gojo is the type of person who spoils films. Before Midoriya can suggest an action movie, the cursed doll punches him in the face again. Frustrated, Midoriya tosses the teddy bear to the ground. Bakugo internally laments the humiliation of being bested by a doll. Gojo reminds Midoriya to maintain a steady energy flow, even when irritated, as the cursed doll continues to attack him. Aizawa explains that Midoriya's negative emotions, including annoyance and irritation, will provoke the doll. Meanwhile, the villains remain silent, unable to control their own emotions. The scene shifts to Tokyo High, where Fushiguro, Inumaki, Panda, and Maki are gathered. Panda questions Fushiguro about carrying cursed tools, to which Fushiguro explains that he prefers to keep his hands free for his curse technique. Mina comments on Yamamo's ability to create tools at will, but Momo defends herself, stating that she needs focus to create them and can't do so in the heat of battle. Tiger praises Momo for her progress. Maki points out that she has Panda carry her extra tools, prompting Panda to flex humorously. Fushiguro, unimpressed, regrets asking. The scene returns to Gojo and Midoriya, with the movie loading on the screen. Midoriya sits on the couch, holding the cursed teddy bear, looking bored. Gojo decides to entertain himself by acting as if he is on camera, introducing himself as a teacher at Tokyo Metropolitan Jujutsu Technical High School. Siro questions Gojo's antics, and Gojo pretends to notice Midoriya's struggles with cursed energy, offering advice in a playful manner. As Gojo leans in close to Midoriya, suggesting a scenario involving college boys, Midoriya, irritated, tells him to stop. The audience watches with a mix of amusement and annoyance, and edge-shot sighs, reflecting on Gojo's ability to shift from respected to irritating in an instant. The scene shifts back to Fushiguro and the others, continuing their discussions. Some sorcerers keep cursed spirits that can store and retrieve objects, Panda suggested to Fushiguro. Storage-type Shikigami, huh? Murmured Midoriya. Maki dismissed the idea, stating that it was a rare ability and took time to tame such spirits. Momo then posed a question about whether Fushiguro had to tame his Shikigami, which could explain his ability to use them. Toga noted that while Fushiguro likely did tame his Shikigami, none of them were of the storage type. Maki expressed interest in any that might be found, jokingly offering a year's supply of sausage in exchange. Big brain moment, sir, Shishida commented. Meanwhile, Fushiguro rested his fist on his chin, lost in thought. He replayed Sukuna's words from that night, reflecting on the strength of the cursed womb. Sukuna had questioned why Fushiguro had run away, calling it a wasted opportunity. Fushiguro wondered if he had the potential to defeat special grades, musing to himself. Tetsutetsu blinked rapidly, surprised. K-19 confirmed that Fushiguro did possess that potential, as Sukuna was known as the King of Curses due to his mastery of cursed energy and techniques. All Might added that Sukuna could assess a person's skill in jujutsu and their potential just by looking at them. Fushiguro pressed his fingers into the ground, realizing something significant as they passed through with a sludgy effect. Mineta exclaimed that Fushiguro's fingers had turned intangible. Bakugo yelled at him, reminding him that they could see it. Inumaki pointed at Fushiguro, drawing the attention of Panda and Maki. Maki asked what was happening, while Midoriya began taking notes in his notebook. Pixie Bob curiously inquired about the notes, which prompted Midoriya to explain that he was trying to decode Inumaki's vocabulary and tone to learn his language. Lida raised his eyebrows, intrigued by Midoriya's explanation. Midoriya elaborated that Inumaki had pointed at Fushiguro saying, "Tuna tuna," and based on Maki's reaction he deduced that it meant, "Look look," or "Look over there." The group exchanged skeptical glances, unsure if Midoriya would actually succeed. Fushiguro smiled, feeling confident in his understanding. Mina gasped, realizing that Fushiguro was going to carry his weapons using shadows. Jiro playfully captured Mina with her earphone jack, questioning her sudden change. Mina animatedly protested, confused by Jiro's comment. Just then, Tsu asked about Uraraka, drawing Jiro's attention away from Mina. Their question was quickly answered when Kujisaki appeared outside a mall, searching for boutiques and calling out for Urahara. Tsu, feeling embarrassed, returned to her seat, eliciting laughter from the audience. Uraraka's eyes widened as she looked at Midoriya, blushing at the thought of what he might have said. She brushed it off, insisting that there was no way he would say something like that. Midoriya, however, bit his tongue, realizing the implications of his earlier words. Miruko snickered, teasing that it seemed Midoriya had a crush. Most of the group remained oblivious to this exchange. As a movie scene played out, the audience watched intently. Midoriya, resting on the couch, was about to take a sip of cola when a cursed corpse unexpectedly punched him in the face, causing him to spill the drink. Groans filled the room as Todoroki expressed his newfound dislike for the doll in the film. Recovery Girl questioned why the doll had attacked, noting that it seemed the character had shown no emotions during the scene. Lita theorized that Midoriya's distraction with the drink had triggered the doll's reaction, a theory that Kendo agreed with. Midoriya coughed, lamenting that he couldn't enjoy his cola without interruption. Gojo, leaning casually against the table, suggested that perhaps he should refrain from drinking while watching. Midoriya insisted that snacks were essential for movie watching. Gojo stepped forward, mentioning he had business to attend to, but paused to ask Midoriya if he had spoken to Sukuna while he was dead. Midoriya, confused, replied that they had talked about something, but he couldn't recall the details. Gojo remained silent for a moment before acknowledging the significance of Midoriya's forgetfulness regarding their conversation. Melissa pointed out that it confirmed the pact was real, while Tsukachi expressed concern over Sukuna's intentions. As the group contemplated the implications, K-19 smirked, and time passed. Gojo sat in the back seat of a car driven by Ijichi, with the moon shining brightly above them. Ijichi asked if Gojo wanted to stop anywhere before his appointment with the principal, to which Gojo replied that it was fine. Gojo decided to show up early for a change and leaned against the car window. Sensing something, he sat up straight and instructed Ijichi to stop the car. Ijichi hesitated, surprised by the sudden command, but eventually complied. Gojo stepped out. Nijire, observing the situation, exclaimed about Gojo's keen senses. Gojo then told Ijichi to move ahead, prompting Ijichi to stammer in response, questioning if Gojo was testing him. He wondered if he would be in trouble for leaving. Gojo, slightly annoyed, asked what Ijichi thought he was. After a moment of hesitation, Ijichi drove away. Kendo raised a question about why Ijichi seemed so nervous around Gojo. Nijire agreed, noting Ijichi's timid demeanor. Lita speculated whether Gojo had bullied Ijichi in the past, causing the audience to narrow their eyes in suspicion. Naomi stepped in to clarify the situation, explaining that Gojo was not a bully but rather someone who often insulted others without malice. Ijichi, being naturally shy, had been the target of Gojo's harmless pranks in the past, which explained his nervousness around him. K-19 added that Gojo had never been personal or violent with Ijichi, emphasizing that their interactions were lighthearted. The audience, who had been glaring at the screen, relaxed upon realizing that Gojo was not a bully. Mina expressed her relief, stating that she liked Gojo and would have regretted it if he had been mean. Bakugo flinched at this, which did not go unnoticed by Aizawa, who narrowed his eyes at him. Kirishima voiced his disdain for bullies, while Midoriya noticed the guilt and regret in Bakugo's eyes, realizing how deeply it affected him to hear such words from a friend. Both Midoriya and Bakugo felt anxious, fearing that the truth about Bakugo's past might come to light and lead to their classmates and teachers turning against him. Nizu observed Bakugo closely, sensing the tension and growing suspicious that Bakugo had bullied Midoriya in middle school. However, no one else seemed to notice this exchange. Unbeknownst to them, someone else in the hall had witnessed everything and was now glaring at Bakugo with a fierce intensity. Jiro's ears perked up as she detected 2 rapid heartbeats. Returning to the action, Gojo stood confidently in the middle of the road with his hands in his pockets. Just as Momo was about to ask him something, she was interrupted by the camera panning above Gojo. Jogo descended from the sky, aiming to crush Gojo, but Gojo skillfully jumped away just in time. Jogo landed with a force that cracked the ground and created a small crater. Endeavor acknowledged Jogo's strength, noting that despite his fire being weaker than his own and Shoto's, Jogo's physical prowess made him formidable, at least on par with several fingers of Sukuna. All Might expressed excitement about witnessing Gojo in action, while Midoriya hoped they would finally learn more about Gojo's abilities. K-19 reassured them that they would get their answers. Shigaraki grinned, pointing out that Jogo's strength would give them a rough idea of Gojo's capabilities. Jogo, grinning widely, faced Gojo, who asked him with a poker face who he was. Bakugo interrupted the moment with a sarcastic remark about the rhyming nature of their names, trying to lighten the mood. The anticipation for the upcoming battle filled the air, but Shoto Todoroki found himself lost in thought, puzzled by the AI's cryptic reference to Tuya. Meanwhile, K-19 cracked his neck and smiled mischievously to himself, eager to see everyone's reactions to Gojo's true abilities.